Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the inaugural Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. I'm Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky. So excited to be bringing you the RCC with my good friend and partner in crime, former world champion. Oh, wrong introduction. Grandmaster Robert Hess. Robert, good morning to you. I'm super pumped. How are you feeling?
I couldn't be any more excited, honestly. This event, it's new. It's going to be so much fun. Rapid chess featuring the best players in the world. What more could you ask for?
Well, you could ask for a better co-commentator. Nah, just kidding.
I was going to ask for that, but I wanted to be polite.
You know, I'm starting too early. I'm going to wait a couple of hours. I'm going to be nice today. First, we got to do things like review the format, and other such stuff. So let's have a look. This is, of course, the very first RCC weekend, and it works, Robert, on a Grand Prix points system. The Grand Prix points gained throughout the 26-week season are accumulated and used for ranking. The final season scores are based on highest scoring 13 weeks of a player's participation, and the top 12 players qualify for the finals. Let's have a look at the layout of Grand Prix points.
Yeah, we see here 10 points for first place, 7 for second, 5 for the split between third and fourth, and so on from there. So you want to win these events. You want to start compiling those points. That way you can get ahead of the field.
Indeed. And in terms of who is playing and who is invited, all players ranked within FIDE's top 100 list are invited to this tournament, as well as the top 10 women and top 10 juniors classical rating taken from January 2021. And there are, of course, 10 wildcard. Here are some of the big names in the tournament.
I see a familiar face. Yes, I do.
No.
There in the second row is none other than Daniel Naroditsky. And as Danya pointed out, the top 13 finishes will be counted. So Hikaru Nakamura, he's not taking part today. Levon Aronian, they're busy over the board out there in the FIDE Grand Prix, but they will take part in many of these events, have a chance to not just win the weekly prizes, but ultimately those end of season prizes, which are quite substantial.
Indeed. And weekly prizes total 20,000. No, what you're seeing right now is not the overall prizes. This is prizes every week. First place, 7,500. Second place, 3,500. Robert, these are massive sums, and I love this. This raises the motivation. The players always put out their full effort, but this is great. And these are just weekly prizes.
That's right, $7,500 for first place in a given week, let alone if you look at the whole season, the final prize fund, $150K for those places 1 through 16. That will be a ton of fun coming our way this August.
Yes. Any of the players wanted a Tesla? Well, one RCC first place later. I actually don't know how much a Tesla costs, but that is a very handsome sum of money indeed. And in terms of the schedule, it's very easy. Mark your calendars. The RCC happens every weekend. The Swiss is on Saturdays. The knockout is on Sundays. And essentially it runs February 12th. That's today through June.
That's right. And there is going to be a brief pause for a small event known as the Candidates. Otherwise, as you said, every single Saturday and Sunday heading your way to the end of the season this coming August. So, Danya, I'm super stoked for what even the first event is going to bring today.
I'm so incredibly stoked as well, Robert, and just want to make sure everybody knows to go to go.chess.com/RCC for more details. You can watch on chess.com/events. And of course, we wanted to thank our sponsor for the RCC, Coinbase. The Rapid Chess Championship is brought to you by Coinbase. Whether you're looking to make your first crypto purchase or you're a crypto GM, Coinbase has you covered. Earn crypto by learning more with Coinbase Earn. Explore DeFi and Web3 with Coinbase Wallet. Get exclusive rewards when you spend with Coinbase Card and much more. Learn more at coinbase.com/chess and get $10 in Bitcoin, not $5 anymore, $10 in Bitcoin when you sign up and verify your account, Robert.
So you're saying that holding out this long is going to give me an extra $5. So I've earned something.
Yes.
Okay.
You have. No, it's pretty serious money. You can buy a lot with $10.
I don't disagree. I'm happy to know about it. I hope everybody takes advantage of it if they're interested. And we're just in for a treat today, Danya. I'm so looking forward to these games beginning in just a few, but I think before they do, we're going to head on for a quick break. But when we return, the action will commence here at the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase.
Welcome back to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Robert, the games have begun. Here we go. The gong has sounded.
Oh, yes, it has, and the games are underway, and there's a rook on G1 by Jan Nepomniachtchi. So that is the first game that caught my eye. Jan is actually the highest rated player in the field based on chess.com rapid rating, but of course, many of these people play more blitz than rapid time controls, and everyone has a shot.
Absolutely. And this is what really makes this so magical. There's so many weekends. Anything can happen in any given weekend. And I love the fact that points are accumulated throughout. It rewards consistency. And of course, it rewards playing in at least 13 of the RCCs.
That's right. And I mean, look at this position here in game one. F4 just played. The rook looks quite bad on G1, frankly, because you're not getting G4 in. But if you play Queen B6 to take advantage of the rook's placement, the rook slides back to H1, and then you have to ask the question, is your queen well placed on B6? The answer is probably not.
Probably not, because you can't push your B pawn, and often you'll see that queen sliding back to C7. And maybe black will do that. Queen B6, force the rook back, and now go Queen C7, try to get B5. And now white can go F5 in such positions, or white can keep the tension in the center. Very, very sort of double-sided tension going on here.
That's right. And we have seen the moves Queen B6, Rook H1, and then Rook to C8. And white just says, I'm going to castle queenside. Your kingside development is slow. And even if you do develop this dark sword bishop, it's going to be hard to castle kingside for black because your pawn is out on H5.
Yeah. Although black might decide that it's actually the lesser evil. But for now, the king is relatively safe in the center. And Jan positions his king on B1, of course, very typical move after you've castled queenside. And I think we might see Queen C7. I don't really see how else black gets started on the queenside. Maybe Knight C5, but eventually he's going to have to do something. And there it is, castles.
And you see No Fear, and I believe this is Aram Hakobian with the black pieces. No Fear, F5 is played. The bishop can take this knight on B3 or sit on C4. I would take on B3 because I think if bishop C4, we get the situation where after trade, this move knight to D5 is probably going to be a problem since the rook on C4 is hanging. What a tactical shot, Danya. The rook on C4
Brilliant.
and bishop on E7 both lose.
Absolutely brilliant. I was just going to say bishop takes F6 and knight D5, going for positional control over the D5 square. But you're right, the immediate knight D5 is even more effective. But even something like this looks quite a bit unpleasant. Queen is perfectly positioned. White has the outpost on D5. So I agree. Bishop takes B3 looks more sensible. But what do you do after that, Robert? A takes B3. You have to find an effective follow-up.
Well, maybe step one is take this knight. Step two is take the other knight. And knight takes E4 is available for black, but is white going to throw in bishop takes F6 after rook takes C3? So this could be a really, wow, that was played.
Wow. Immediately, yeah,
goodness.
bishop F6 is forced, no? Because if you take on C3, knight takes C4, and black wins another piece. So you have to play bishop takes F6.
And look at how quickly he goes knight takes F6.
Coming to F2. The knight is coming to F2. Knight takes E4. Queen has to move, and then knight F2 forks white's rooks. And at the end of the day, white's going to be up a pawn. Black's going to be up a pawn. But it's not the end of the story, Robert. White's bishop can hop on out to C4, and white's going to have a lot of control over those light squares.
That's right, the C4 to F7 square. Also H5, you really wish that pawn could go back 1 or 2 squares because now black can go pawn by taking one of the rooks, but H5 is likely going to fall. There's no way to protect it. And black's king is the one that's in trouble. The bishop on C4 protected by this pawn on B3. The D5 outpost still remains here. The bishop on E7 not doing anything. Danya, this looks really nice for Nepo.
A lot of fireworks, a lot of pretty play by Aram, but that's how it happens sometimes. I wonder how much of this Jan saw, because he took some time after rook takes C3, but you know what they say, good players are always lucky. E4, black trying to mix things up and provoking white into taking on H5. And Jan says, thank you very much.
Okay, so knight takes H1, rook has to go take that knight over there. And maybe because the queen is left F3, this black queen can come to F2 and the bishop can come to F6. And all of a sudden, white doesn't have an attack, at least not one that's easy to press forward with. And black has this passed E-pawn.
Yeah, because white's only real vehicle of continuing the kingside attack is to push this G-pawn, but that's incredibly slow and cumbersome. And once the queen gets to F2, as long as black controls the G5 square, white's not getting that pawn past G4.
That's right. I mean, and the rook at H1, where is he going to get in the game from? It wants to go somewhere, but rook D1, rook D5, that doesn't look realistic. Yeah. And with the queen on F2 and potentially pushing this pawn up, and don't count out black's attack. With the bishop on F6, it's guarding G7 in case white goes after, but also looking at B2.
Yeah, this is an important moment. Maybe black is thinking about starting with bishop F6 in order to throw in queen D4. He does. Now, I didn't see exactly what to do after g4. Maybe g4, d5, and then if bishop takes d5, you fork the mate threat, and then the bishop. Aram is a very tricky player. He likes this kind of stuff.
That's so nice. That's a good find by you. d5, that'll shut that bishop down in the light squares, and I'll just allow black to press forward. So at this moment in time, to actually, after rook d1, e3 happens. But what about your move g4? How are you stopping g5 and so on?
Yeah, e3 was played so quickly, Robert. I wonder if Aram might have just forgotten that g4 is a threat. And if you play queen d8, white can just play h4 and ram through that king side. You obviously can't take that pawn because of rook h1. Was this just a terrible blunder by Hakobian?
You know, I'm also wondering, Danya, to answer your question with another question, do you think that these players are so used to having less time on their clock when they're playing online that he's rushing some decisions? He still has 6 minutes left. There is no increment in this format, but still he has plenty of time. And e3, that seems like he's pushing a pass pawn. How could you say that's wrong? But it might have been a mistake.
Is queen a5 here possible? Trying to meet g5 with queen takes f5? And I'll answer your question in a moment. Just trying to figure out whether black...
Bishop d3. Just bishop d3 at the end.
You did. And then e2, bishop to e2, bishop takes f5, and the queen x-ray defends the rook.
That's right. Queen saves the rook back here. I mean, he's using the e-pawn, both you and Aram Hakobian, as a decoy. Please go take that pawn. And maybe right now, e2 is the move, just trying to distract some of white's pieces. Yeah. But if that's your best choice, then you've given away your passed pawn, and now white won't even be down any material with a nice potential attack on, actually will be up a pawn, if I'm not mistaken, with an attack going still on the king side.
Yeah, and in that case, endgames will not really offer black any salvation. Whereas if you can keep the pawn on e3, a queen trade could help black save the game. But to answer your question, absolutely. These players are used to 3-minute chess. That's what they play mostly. So there's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be some adjustment pains as the players get back into, a 10-minute frame of mind. Make no mistake, I love the time control. I think it's very conducive. I think it's a happy medium between fast play, but also high quality play. But the fact that there's no increment, Robert, I love that, because we are going to see some time scrambles, that's for sure.
And I just am calculating some crazy lines here, Danya. For example, let's say pawn e2, bishop takes e2, like queen comes into f2, g5. Okay. Bishop g5, queen g5, queen takes e2. You think your rook's F6. Under attack, but f6, I mean, that's the easy way forward. It's a checkmate. So I was just doing all this work in my head here. The problem is that checkmate on g7,
beautiful,
g6, and the queen slides right in.
Look at that line. And the king on a2 is so safe. That's the problem with taking on b3. You give white automatic luft, and it's like luft on steroids, because you also have pawns sheltering the king from any wayward checks.
And, well, the line we talked about before, it happened. Queen d8, h4.
It looks over.
It looks like a done deal. Jan Nepomniachtchi off to a blistering start here. So his bishop's under attack. He can just retreat, and the bishop now can't take on h4 because also f6 is available.
And Jan is wasting absolutely no time. He has black's king in his crosshairs. That pawn rumbling toward g5. It's unstoppable, and I basically think black can resign here.
That's right.
Wow.
This is over. This is Jan Nepomniachtchi's game, and what a start to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase for Jan Nepomniachtchi. I mean, this is really a marvelous game. Just g5 now. Just
black totally desperate here, trying to vacate the f8 square for the king, but the move f6 here, g takes f6, g6. I mean, look at the speed with which Jan is conducting this attack. It's maybe queen h7 first, and then g6.
He pre-moved g6. He has this attack ready, and that's what we know about Jan Nepomniachtchi. Yes, the World Championship wasn't his finest event ever, but he's such a great attacking player. Dynamic chess is his forte. There's no stopping mate on f7 because you play queen to e7. That allows queen h8 checkmate. So you entomb your own king there. It's going to be mate, and this is over.
Yes, and Hakobian is going to be kicking himself for playing too quickly in that critical moment, but it's just the first round. There's plenty of time to recover, but what a brutal pairing. Yeah, you got Jan Nepomniachtchi with black in the first round. Have fun. And black did not have too much fun in the second part of that game. Well done by Mr. Nepo.
That's right. So let's go on to another game here. Where should we go, Danya? So many. Let's go to the game between Abhijit Gupta. is that even in this event? Why do they have a 3 versus 2? Were they playing before this event? Why is that here? That's not here. Get out of here. All right, let's go to the game between Caruana and Tamir Nabati. I was tricked into clicking on that game. I saw Abhijit Gupta. That's a strong grandmaster. He must be playing. No, it's only top 100 players in the world, and I guess at this point in time, Abhijit not amongst them. But oh my gosh, Danya, fighting Caruana with the black pieces. And he's in some big trouble. I mean, this H file is open for the rooks. The white king's on F2, but seems pretty safe. I like this position for Tamir Nabati, and so does the engine.
Yeah, but bishop, the reason Fabi played C5 is to get his bishop to C6 in order to at least target something. That pawn on E4 is perhaps white's biggest and only weakness. So Tamir has to find some way to coordinate his pieces so as not to give that pawn away.
Yeah, it's actually a good point, because where is white's breakthrough coming from? G5 is the most tempting move for, I would imagine, all of our viewers. But after H takes G5, your king is caught in the line of fire, so you can't take back. So it's not going to be easy for white to press forward at this moment.
Yeah, I thought maybe you can put the king on G3 just to unpin the F pawn, but what exactly does that give you? King G3, bishop C6. And, if you have to move the rook from H1 to E1, black will breathe a massive sigh of relief, because that will make a lot less likely any sort of H-file breakthrough. He plays King G3. He's also got 3 minutes on the clock.
Look at Fabiano showing off some speed here. And you're right, the evaluation is going down. So there must have been some critical line that allowed white to punch through. And I still think white has some chance to eventually play rook H5 and pawn G5, but it feels very slow. And there's a king on G3. So you can't just go full steam ahead for an attack. Your king is the one that might end up in trouble.
Yeah, and I feel like the momentum completely on Fabi's side. I'm going to predict that he's going to win this game.
Yeah, this is, oh boy. I mean, look at the time.
I think you have to play rook E1. I think you have to bite the bullet, maybe queen G2, but you got to defend that pawn and start playing more slowly.
And there, queen E3 is played. So does black have time to, actually, can black just take on E4? Yeah, and play D5?
Well, takes D5, I'll go G5.
Okay, so now you're going to try to pester my queen over there.
Gosh, what a
and
messy position.
If it's captured, then rook takes H8. You've distracted this rook from the pin. So at the end of the variation, the bishop can just leave the E4 square. That's a nice line.
And you can still move your queen from F6, but then I can take on H6 with either piece, depending on where you go. So that is a little bit iffy. I think this is exactly what Fabi is calculating. Maybe queen G6, maybe queen E7, but it's very iffy.
Yeah, because if you move your queen, then H6 falls, and that doesn't look very pleasant for black. So with the lead on the clock, he plays queen to E6, just piling up pressure on the E4 pawn. And I think from a practical perspective, Danya, with the time advantage, it should be a better position for black, despite what the evaluation bar is telling us.
Absolutely. And that's how you have to play on your opponent's time pressure. Generally speaking, unless you're absolutely confident that it's the best move, you want to avoid overly forcing lines because that essentially helps your opponent find only moves. Queen E6, very practically unplayed. Does white defend E4? Do you go rook E1? Do you go G5? White's got all these options. And now Tamir down on 2 minutes. I just don't see this happening for him.
Yeah, he needs to find a move quickly. But even a move like rook E1, you're going away from the attack. And I was already thinking, can I try to make a move like F5? I know I can't do it right now, but can I toss in H5 to play F5? There's a king on G3. So if I can open up this bishop into the attack, open up the G file, I feel like it's white's king, not black's king, that's going to end up with an attack on it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And Fabi trying to decide how is he going to improve his position. He can now kind of breathe easily. Maybe queen F6, maybe rook E7. Black's got quite a few ways. Now, what you don't want to do is go C4. No. You don't want to give any additional squares, particularly the D4 square. C4 will be up with queen D4 check. And did he play it?
No, I just played it.
Oh, you played it? Yeah, okay. D4 check.
He played king F8. What a move that is. And he's just moving off the G file. Instead of any pawn sacrifices, he could just go rook G, and then F5 is a pin everywhere.
Wow. This F5 idea is just nasty. And Tamir going E5. He wants to meet D takes E5 probably with F5. And then, but where's he going after queen F6?
Nowhere.
Because you're not going G5, right? Black can just take, and the H8 rook is going to be defended by the queen. I think he's kind of losing the thread. I mean, he's kind of already lost the thread. And if F takes E5, but now maybe the king can keep running. Although king E7, there'll be bishop F5. So Fabi is not out of the woods just yet.
But if his queen, Fabi's queen, goes to d5, there's already checkmate threats. Oh, if I draw my arrows better, to g2 square, and the king on g3 is in some big trouble. I don't think that it's going to be a checkmate. White can obviously guard the g2 square, but at some point, queen d5 may be a saving move for black.
Yeah. No, and so king e7 is therefore possible. And Tamir might have to make a slower move like queen f4. But I think Fabi can also conceivably move his king back to g7, although maybe you're going from the frying pan into the fire and allowing white to play g5. No, he goes queen d5 straight away. Rook e2 defending the g2 square.
Okay, there's a draw by force. I see zeros. Rook takes e5, queen takes e5, queen f3, and that's a draw.
Oh, so, and queen h1 with queen f3. But will Fabi go for it in Tamir's time pressure?
Yeah, just to show it's a little draw, but the h2 g3 and f3 h1 for black. So we'll see if that is how this game ends. I mean, Fabio must be tempted to play on, but his king is not very safe. H6 is under attack. So can he really afford to play on is the big question.
Yeah, Nabatsi is a very experienced blitz player. I think he's around 2,900 on chess.com. He's no stranger to winning the game with a minute and a half left. I think Fabi's going to, I was about to say, I think he's going to go for it, but he does. King e7.
Wow. And that's a big
He goes
decision.
for it.
Okay, so how to continue his attack for White? He's spending too much time in the money. He was bishop f5.
He is.
And now
anchoring
rook d2.
the bishop.
Yeah, rook d2 might almost trap this queen.
Uh-oh. And the most important thing also, you can't go king d8 because then rook d2 pins the queen. What is White threatening? Well, White maybe is threatening e6, but the more important thing is what does Fabi do? How does he improve his position? That king on e7, Robert, is completely stranded. He can't go back to f8 because you're going to drop h6.
And it's dropped with check, and that's really important because the queen cannot leave the e3 square without like queen f3. But if the king's on f8, as we're mentioning, the king falls into a check at the end of that tactical sequence. So how does he is black also facing e6, right? Is that one of White's next ideas as well?
E6, there might be f6, but then rook d2 is incredibly scary. Fabi stops rook d2. I think that makes sense. Wait a minute. Rook takes h6, queen g5 check to Stamura, but then king e8.
And then there's
then you have a repetition.
There might be a draw by repetition. So you drag that rook off the last rank. But I was wondering, what are you doing? Because if queen takes h6, you lose the game, right? You take on h6, and queen f3 check picks up this rook over here, or even actually picks up the queen on h6, even better. So this was a sequence that allows queen g5, and that's exactly what's happening. The king just went to e8, queen g8 check, king here, and this is going to be a draw because if the king touches f8, you lose the rook with check.
You lose the rook with check, and you basically get mated. And if you play f6, well, that's even more unthinkable. He takes f6, and the king gets checkmated immediately. So Fabi, he's going to have to bite the bullet. Not an altogether bad result. No, White goes for it.
Oh my gosh, he goes for it, but queen f3, king h4, queen h1, king
and
g5,
queen c1 is a draw.
C1. Oh, because it's king h5. Oh my gosh, barely escaping.
The point is that black, I guess, can't really take the rook on e2 because White's going to have queen h8 and queen f6. White has a draw in his pocket. So Tamir calculating this line with almost no time. Oh, and now king f8, queen takes d8. Yeah, so you have to go to e8.
Okay, but can black play on? That's the big question here. Is there a useful move like rook d1 going? That's d2. Go d1 going for a checkmate over here, but then you might get your king in trouble with queen h8, queen f6, and things like that. So
yeah, and White has at least perpetual there with queen h8, queen f6, queen h8. So I think Fabi is best advised now with 39 seconds to go queen h1, queen c1. And he has to do it fast. Don't wait until we have 5 seconds or White's going to give up that queen.
And there's a big difference with the king being on e8 versus an e7, because if that king were on e7, just to really quickly go back to this point in time here, there would be a really nasty way to end this game. King h4, queen h1. They're making moves. I can't make them quick enough. I'll show you after the game. But there was a rook h8 tactic. Like if right now king h5 and the king was on e7, there'd be rook h8. So you can put queen h1 skewer at the end.
That's a very nice idea. And Fabi correctly leaving himself 20 seconds on the clock. What an incredible draw. And now you can show the line.
Yeah. So if the king was here on e7, check. Here, check. King h5, it looks like the same thing. If you take my queen, I take that. But rook h8 is the winner. And after queen takes h8, because you're pinned, queen h1 check skewers the queen and the king on the h file, and you win the queen that way. So that's why it was important to push that king back to e8.
And yeah, if White had gone bishop h7 there, you actually just take on h7 and you still skewer the queen.
Yeah.
Wow. Fascinating tactical lines.
Okay, well, let's go back into the tournament here. Still some games going. Just one, it looks like. Jose Martinez. Oh, and as soon as we tune in.
And that game is over. He dispatches Kirill Alexeyenko up a rook and checkmating. Wow.
I don't think he's up enough, Danya. I think that this was hard to say who, but 11 seconds. So it went down to the wire.
Indeed. But the first round, Robert, is in the books. We are going to go on a very, very short break. When we come back, we are going to talk about the round and watch the start of round 2. You're watching the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. We'll be back in just a couple. Welcome back to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Robert, don't breathe because we are starting round 2. And Jan Nepomniachtchi with a sparkling victory in round 1, facing Grandmaster Andrei Volokitin, who it looks like is away from his computer.
Yeah, that's shocking because the rounds, 10 minutes for one player, 10 minutes, so that's 20 total. You have to know the next round is starting as soon as the previous one ends. So Volokitin will have to find his way back to the computer. We'll come back to this game. Instead, we'll go to the game between the Chess Warrior and Mishanik, that is Alexei Saranov with the black pieces. He's well known to the chess community. And I think Chess Warrior, do we need an introduction for that player, Danya? You tell me.
Chess Warrior, I mean, a very unique account name. I think that's a young Uzbek grandmaster, if memory serves me right, but we'll get confirmation on that.
Isn't that
very, very shortly?
Is that Nordirbek Abusattorov?
I think that's Nordirbek Abusattorov.
Exactly.
Who won a very small local provincial tournament recently. I forget the name of it. It wasn't a very important event.
Yeah. He dabbles with world rapid champion.
That's the world champion. I heard about that tournament.
Yeah, so
that was a small event. Yeah, well, it wasn't important. Why are we even talking about it?
Small events. He might have a small plus here. He has a little bit more space thanks to these pawns all marching forward, 4 in a row.
And I think he used this line to defeat none other than Magnus Carlsen at the World Rapid. This 4 knights English with e4. And it's an interesting thing because you weaken the d4 square, but now you see white playing d4. That eradicates the weakness. And after e takes d4, rook takes d4, white has this very annoying bind on the center, the pawns being on c4 and e4. But maybe Alexei can take the opportunity while he still has the x-ray against white's queen. Can he take and go d5?
That's the big question and why he's thinking it. He does play e takes d4. Alexei's such a quick player. He was queen e7, keeping the d6 pawn defendant going after the pawn on e4. That knight on a4, knights in the rim are dim. Bring that knight back to c3. It would have protected e4 and stopped d5 at the same time. But I guess knight takes e4. There's some tactical poses, which is rook to e1. Rook e1. With a pin on the knight. If you move the knight, you lose a full rook in the end. So nice tactics.
But here there's d5. I think it's not the end of the story. d5, and if f3. But no, I should play f3 because I was going to say if you take on d5 and then play f3, black actually goes queen d7, unpinning the queen and simultaneously attacking white's knight. So a lot of tactical subtleties here, but I don't think you can take the pawn. And Nordirbek saw that in 5 seconds?
Yeah, he's a little good as we were discussing. So yeah, he found that very quickly. And now he brings the knight back. And this is what you were talking about with the bind. No d5 for black, the knight c3, rook d4, rook on d1. If those pieces were enough, the pawns on c and e4 make certain that d5 will not happen anytime soon. So Danya, this looks excellent for white, a clear advantage with the activity. Black is sort of stuck in place. And that's a blunder. Why is that a blunder, Danya?
Is it because of f4 or is it because of c5? I'm trying to figure out.
Both look great. Because after f4, the queen marches back. I don't think you can go queen h5 because
I think
then
you might be able to.
Really? Because
queen takes h2 in the end.
So what if I just play h3 and your queen is doing nothing on the side of the board?
That's the issue. that D6 pawn is a huge issue. If you lose that pawn, white's pieces just fly into black's position. The pawn gets to E5. Okay, Naroditsky goes C5.
Yep, that's also a great choice.
D5, I think he just wants to play E takes D5, and there's a cool line there. If you take twice on E3, white simply takes on C6, and these combined problems on the back rank and with your pawns, I don't think bode very well for black's position.
That's right. There's back rank problems. If you take on C6, we get to this position where you can defend against the checkmate, but even once you do that, it looks like it should just be a loss because the knight comes to E2, it comes to D4, it picks off C6. Even though material is level to start, it's not going to be for long.
Yeah, these maneuvers and knight end games are totally devastating because you literally don't have the horsepower to defend that C6 pawn. Get it? But
that was a good one. I'm proud of you.
It was seamlessly integrated into the commentary because I was going to say that anyway.
Okay, I'm glad. So, this one, not fun for black. We see the world rapid champion, Naroditsky Abdusattorov, the teenager from Uzbekistan. I mean, he has tremendous, not just potential, right? When you say potential, you think about the future. No, he just has tremendous skill right now. And he is working a very strong player in Alexis Sarana. He's just going to take on D5. And I feel like he is just going to take this game.
And he's got 8 minutes on the clock. He spent less than 2 minutes. That's pretty unbelievable. If you think about who Sarana is, he's such a solid player. He's booked up. He's hard to beat like this. And, that's what confidence looks like. You talk about players having momentum. You talk about players actively fulfilling their potential. This is what fulfilling potential looks like. Was there ever any doubt he takes D5? There was a tempting move F4. And maybe you can show the line, Robert. F4, Queen H5, E5 looks good, but then black takes on H2 and escapes. Of course, Naroditsky not fooled by that line.
And not just escapes, so wins a pawn and then wins the game. The evaluation swing heavily in black's favor there. You always have to watch out for those knights. The forks won't be good. Knight takes D5, speaking of watching out for knights. So what if you take on E5, rook takes E5? This is what black is trying to count on, is defending this knight with all the pieces. But F4 simply kicks the rook away. You say, I'm going to protect that knight. No, you're not going to get me away from it. Then G4 happens. You can't take on F4 because at the end, there's a rook hanging and a back rank checkmate. And so that will not allow black to keep the knight steady on D5.
Exactly. And the back rank also hurts black's chances if you drop the rook to F6 in that line. White just takes on D5. And if only Alexei had the move H6, and that would have helped him so much. It actually wouldn't have helped him maybe all that much. It would have still been bad. But here, you're simply lost because the white rook comes to D7. You have to waste the tempo to create luft.
Exactly. And you lose your whole queen side, and then the C5 pawn and the B4 pawn, they'll just march up the board together. So this looks... After we are at this point here, will he play F4? He actually might be able to take knight takes D5 because black can't even trade off all the pieces because white's pass pawn would be first. But of course, Naroditsky, he doesn't go for these questionable decisions. This is so straightforward. I'm going to win a pawn. I'm going to get my rook to D7. I am going to win this game.
Maybe rook H5 is a try with the idea of meeting G4 with rook H4. Is that something?
But I know
it doesn't work.
Yeah, but I see your point that you're just trying to take on G4 with check. And I could actually even go King F2, but I was thinking King H1. And if you ever trade on the D5 square, you have the same problem, rook to D8, but also rook to D7, winning B7, and you're just collecting the queen side.
And to quote the great Robert Hess, yes, black's going to take on F4 and restore material balance, but it ain't about the quantity of your pass pawn. It's about the quality. And look at that pawn on C5. That pawn is an absolute killer. White has already pre-advanced his passers. So once black loses the queen side, the game is essentially over. He goes rook E8, trying to keep maximum number of pieces on the board. That's probably a good practical chance. But I don't think it's going to help.
There's an instructive moment here because we teach our students you trade pieces when ahead, but rook D8, king F8, rook takes E8 would not be the correct plan. You already see the evaluation go down because after king takes, the rook no longer gets in along the D file and A3 is hanging, the F4 pawn sticks out. Black's king can actually venture forward if white is forced to defend. So don't just go for trades just because you're told when ahead trade. Look for even more promising moves like rook to D7, winning these B7 pawn over here. And well, you can even play rook E7 if the rook leaves E3 to go for doubling on the 7th rank.
Yeah, or rook takes B7. White's king is completely safe. And that's a great point. You can't put on autopilot mode in these kinds of endgames. You have to make very concrete decisions. And Naroditsky seems pretty darn happy with his position there. I guess that's that's meant to signify that he's satisfied.
That's right.
Whatever he just did there.
He's just he's cruising. We have him there looking calm. He's just nodding along to the beat of the game, and he is about to beat Alexei Serrano. So a nice victory in the making for thanks, Danya, for Nordicbeck. We did just see Rook takes A3. So this is actually one of those questions, and he doesn't even ask one, but he takes on B7. I was going to ask, do you want to sit your Rook on E7 first, just to take advantage of the back rank checkmate?
Yeah, but King F8. I think their black had King F8.
Okay. So you, of course, don't want to trade. And if you take, maybe you're allowing, well, the Rook still can't come off the back rank because Rook D8. So maybe it doesn't matter either direction. He's just making the simple moves. Doesn't have to consider anything else. G5.
And if white wants to be extra, wow, G5, F takes G5. What is, I guess the idea for black is Rook E2 and Rook A2. Again, Alexei, very good practical player. And the one thing that white cannot allow is a doubling on the second rank by the black rooks. Maybe, but white can even allow that. But Nordicbeck wasting absolutely no time. There goes his passer, C6, C7, and either Rook B8 or Rook D8 should decide the game.
Great lesson from Nordicbeck here. Don't just take pawns because they seem free, as Danya was saying. As after F takes G5, look at that evaluation. It is tanked because Rook E2, Rook A2, and white's king no longer is that safe. Black has just enough time to get active. So G5 is a nice try by Serrano, but ignored by Nordicbeck, and he's just going to go promote the C pawn.
God, he makes it look easy. This was such a one-sided game, but it was an exquisite performance in all of the stages. By Nordicbeck, what an end game, but what a middle game before that, attacking the D6 pawn like that. Man, oh man, this guy is good. It was not a fluke that he won the World Rapid.
Not in the slightest. He is one of the best players on the planet and still just a teenager. So do not let his age belie his strength. He is that powerful on the chessboard. He is winning this game. So why don't we go to another game if we can here. We have a bunch going on still, of course, because this is the rapid time control. And I don't even know who to pick. We have Anish Giri playing. That's not a bad person to check in on.
Not at all. Let's check him out.
Okay, well, he's now up a pawn. And if only this rook could jump to the back rank, there would be a checkmate problem for white. But there's a bishop in the way, and the knight also covers E1 for good measure. So it looks like Alexei Dreyev
what a
with
nasty
the black pieces.
position.
Yeah, he's in some trouble.
Igrok means player in Russian. So very modestly named player 3069 is Mr. Dreyev, who is not too shabby, but whatever happened here is quite disastrous for black.
Yeah, it's a clean extra pawn. And look, black has a 4-on-3 on the king side that you can't really use, and white has a 3-on-1. So it's essentially like white is up 2 pawns because the 2 extra pawns are on the queen side here. You can start pushing them. Reminder, rook E1 is not checkmate. The knight covers the square, which gives white time to try a move like A4, but this might be what Dreyev wants. A4, rook E2, and if you get A takes B5, there's rook takes B2. Things like this start getting unclear with checks on the back rank that lead to mate. If the bishop can work its way to C5, the F2 pawns on a dark square. So black is trying desperately to get chances around here.
Although in this position that's on the board, the move G3, I think, might help white solve his problems. Defending against mate, the bishop doesn't have a good square. So, but an important moment for Giri, and the move G3 here was bad because the bishop jumps out to C1. You know, bishops in such positions can be quite dangerous. They can be good at mowing down pawns. So precision still required for Giri, but he's got 6 minutes on the clock, minute and a half for Dreyev. I mean, even if Giri messes this up, given the time situation, he should be able to win. And I don't think he will. No,
I think actually he can win by force because king F1, if rook takes B2, now we're trading and I'm up 2 past pawns. And where else can your rook go? Can't go to D2. It'd have to go over to C2. But then your rook is just being chased. Knight D4. Okay, if you take on B2, you lose again. You're just down pawns. If you're rook D2, I think the king comes to E1, and you can't take with the bishop on B2 because your rook needs defense. So I think this actually is very straightforward and marched with the king. King F1 played by Anish Giri, and that should be that.
And what kills you here is what you mentioned, which is the fact that black has no counterplay on the other side of the board. Black doesn't even have the potential to create a passer. So as you said, essentially what's going to be up 2 pawns in the knight versus bishop endgame. I think Alexei... Okay, rook E4, but obviously now you can start playing B3, C4. Really, you can push any pawn in any order. You're going to be winning.
And rook E5 might just force the rooks off. I guess there's the G4 square, but look, if your rook's going over to G4, you're not in good shape. So rook to E5 is another option here for white, and there are plenty of good moves at this point. And
anything.
Simply winning.
Yeah, he's going to win this game. Rook e5. He's going to shoehorn the rook onto g4 or f4. He can even bring his king up. I feel like in a niche move is king e2.
What about rook a4?
Rook a4, rook trade. Now, but I want to keep my pawns. I would go c4. I would keep my pawns.
No, I agree. He's trying to go rook c4. Look at him. But the rook is just trapped over here. So rook c4 will force the rooks off. You could have c3, but now just push your pawns. I mean, you have 3 of them over here.
And I think it's time. Stop procrastinating. Let's go a4.
There it goes.
Let's wrap this one up. There it is.
So maybe let's move away from this game for now. There's Hans Niemann taking on Eric Hansen. So that's a
what a matchup. Let's check that out.
Whoa! What in the world? We tuned in a moment where Eric's king.
Hans, this is destruction by Hans. It's over. That last move, knight g e7 check. Look at Eric's king. It's surrounded by pieces. They are not black pieces. They are white pieces. And if you take that knight with your bishop, you get checkmated on g7.
Goodness.
And otherwise, you drop your bishop on f6.
And he goes queen takes e7, giving up the queen. But this is pretty straightforward at this point. You're up a queen for a rook. The black king is still in danger. You're about to get 5.
And you can take it because rook a1 check might look like it's winning king h2, bishop d6. But no, the queen defends that square. Very important. And I think Eric might simply resign here.
Yes, because queen h8 is a threat and everything's a threat at this point. As long as white doesn't blunder that tactic, as you just mentioned, rook a1. If you forget the rook is hanging, there's bishop d6. And then black, of course, would take advantage of the queen being pinned. So that's not happening. It looks like a nice win there for Hans Niemann. He'll jump to 1 out of 2. Let's keep on going within this tournament. Let's go to Nepo's game. He's still playing this round, it seems, against
Volokitin, who it's good to know actually got to his computer at some point.
Yeah,
I think. Did he finish?
I'm trying to look because I'm trying to get the game, but I'm not pulling it up. So maybe let's pull up a different game if that one is done with. Here we go.
Yeah,
Praggnanandhaa and Jeffrey Zhang. Ooh, the youngster from India looks like he's taking down the youngster from the USA.
Where are Jeffrey's pawns on the king side? Where are they? They're gone. That's not good. Knight e5, but rook coming to h7 here. I think. No, this is completely winning for Prague.
Yeah, this
maybe rook h6 also.
Rook 8. Oh my gosh, I was saying
knight takes d3.
But look, it doesn't work. So I was thinking the same thing.
Takes c6 anyway.
Exactly.
Bishop takes f4 as a pin.
It's check. I blundered my rook. Not so fast. Bishop takes f4. You can't take the rook as a pin. In fact, Jeffrey just resigns on the spot. A nice win for Praggnanandhaa, who had a great finish to the Tata Steel tournament.
Yeah, and he's warmed up. He feels confident. He had an up and down tournament, but he finished strong with that win against Andrei Yesipenko. And now he's on 2 out of 2, having just defeated Jeffrey Zhang. Great game.
Yeah, so wow, what a game that was. And we have Vidit taking on Amin Tabatabai. Amin Tabatabai played so well in the World Cup. He is a qualifier in the Grand Prix. He hasn't played yet, but he will play in legs 2 and 3. And right now with the black pieces, he's holding his own against Vidit because that king on g3, excuse me, on g1, not very safe because rook g3 is actually already forcing at least a draw for black.
Right, and black can continue playing essentially without risk. I was thinking even going king h5 and trying to station the king maybe even on h3. Now, I think if Vidit is careful, he shouldn't have too many problems because he can go rook takes d5 and then rook g5, and the g2 square will be defended by white's rook. But black can pick up the a6 pawn, and obviously he's got, there's a huge difference in piece activity here. And 43 seconds for Vidit, he might also simply lose on time.
Yeah. I mean, this is not easy for white to play because, as you mentioned, king h5, rook d5, king h4, rook g5 helps stop any checkmates. But after rook takes a6, white's frozen more or less.
Completely.
It's not going to be easy. There is king g2, but after rook h3, the attack continues. Maybe rook coming down to a2 with check or to a3 to put pressure on this e3 pawn. So this is really dangerous territory with minimal time remaining. Rook g5, this exact sequence has happened. And just take this pawn a6 and go from there.
I mean, you could go rook g3 check and trade one pair of rooks and rely on your insanely active king. And I think he just did that.
Yeah. In comes the king.
At first, I thought this was a draw. White should be able to hold. But now I realize white's just going to lose both of his pawns. And he's losing the game. 30 seconds now for Vidit on top of it. No, this is a great illustration of how important piece activity is in the endgame. One last chance for Vidit.
But rook a8, rook e8, and the king walks back. It is
just in time.
Oh, that's unfortunate for Vidit Gujrati, but for Amin Tabatabai, a great start here at the Rapid Chess Championship. They just can't come back to F5 and they're back to F6.
That is a face of grim determination. I'm beating Vidit with Black King F6, Rook E7, and Vidit can simply resign.
Yes, 2 extra pawns and down almost a minute on the clock. No, this is not good for Vidit, but you might as well try because a loss is a loss no matter if it's on time or by resignation.
Right. And this, of course, is a very well-known theoretical win. You slowly push your pawns, ensuring that White cannot give side checks to the king. That's the basic strategy, using the pawns as shelter for the king. I mean, G4. G4, Rook A3, goodbye.
That's it. So Amin Tabatabai takes that game. A nice win for him. And okay, we still have a couple games left. I see, we have Bibi Sara Asabayeva playing with the black pieces. And she's in a tough spot.
Struggling, but 20 seconds.
Time trouble.
Anything can happen. We have a rook trade, but look at those pass pawns for White. King E2, Knight D5 is coming. The rook takes G6. Everything is collapsing here for Bibi Sara. Just Knight F5. But there's a fork threat.
Exactly. Don't blunder Knight F4. Sees it. Knight F4, King E4. King E3 is also possible there. Knight takes E3 to check.
Yep, but then King back to E3, Rook F7, E6. It ain't happening. And also Knight D6 wins the rook. That's
right. There it is. Game over. E7, E8 equals queen. This also wins, and a win by resignation there for Rakhmonov. So that was walking a tightrope down the stretch there, but he had it in the bag. He was playing really nice moves, just trying to push those pawns forward. So a nice win for Rakhmonov.
Indeed. He's a strong Russian grandmaster, and man, this field is so packed. And I think that concludes the games for round 2.
It does indeed.
Another blistering round, incredible games, and this is just the beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, we will go on a 1-minute break, and when we come back, we'll have round 3. You're watching the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Back in 60 seconds. The Rapid Chess Championship is brought to you by Coinbase. Whether you're looking to make your first crypto purchase or you're an experienced trader, Coinbase has you covered. Earn crypto and learn about crypto with Coinbase Earn. Explore DeFi and Web3 with Coinbase Wallet. Get exclusive rewards when you spend with Coinbase Card and so much more. Learn more at coinbase.com/chess and get $10 in Bitcoin when you sign up and verify your account. A lot of verified accounts playing in the Rapid Chess Championship as round 3, Robert, is underway. Daniel Naroditsky and Robert Hess bringing you the action. Here we go. Fabby's game on the board right now.
That was a great segue, partner. And here we see a rook on C1, a queen on C8. The rook usually wins that showdown with the queen, so watch out. That knight on F6, it can't make a move like knight to E4. There you blunder upon immediately when knight takes D5. So watch out here for that D5 pawn. That could be one that's vulnerable at some point.
Indeed. Yeah, that's actually quite a concerning setup. There's also knight B5 ideas in some of these positions, although it's not all that dangerous. Black's knight from F6 can always drop back to E8, covering both of the key weak squares, D6 and C7. But I think probably White has a very small but stable edge here.
Yes, I agree with that. So you just come up with a plan. We like the pawn chain from B7, D5. That looks good. We like our bishop on F5. It's active. It's kind of staring into the air, but it's still in a good square. So now where to go to from here? That is the essential question. And what pieces do you want traded? I would like to get this bishop off of F4, but knight H5 would be that same blunder because we lose the D5 pawn. So we don't really have an easy option of getting rid of that bishop.
And it's a catch-22 because if you say, well, let me move my queen from c8 so I can go knight h5, then you give up the b7 pawn. Oh, let me go rook b8 so that I can move the queen so that I can go knight h5. No, now you're blundering the rook again because of that very same bishop. And for Amin, yeah, I was going to say it's worth playing h3, life insurance against knight h5, because now you can always drop the bishop back to h2. But for white, how do you improve the position? Because Fabi doesn't really have any targets at the moment. Everything is super well protected. That's a problem in a lot of these positions, Robert.
That's right, because you look at the pawns are on light squares. It means the dark squares should be vulnerable. But knight at a4, there's nothing you're attacking. The knight on d7 covers both b6 and c5. So maybe this knight on f3 should either go to e5 and trade or go knight e1, knight d3. And the bishop went to f8. I was going to say quickly, Danya, that bishop d8 to c7 was another way to try to get rid of the bishop, but it's a blunder. Because I play king h1, some random move, just to show
this knight takes d5 move.
Knight d5 would be a problem. Knight takes d5, queen takes d5. The queen on c7 is loose, so black would, in fact, blunder a pawn in that sequence. So we see instead the rook coming to e1, Danya. And now, when is it time for black to press forward? Knight takes d5. Is there bishop e6 now? Is that the
bishop
point?
e6. What a tricky idea by Fabi. This looks like a blunder.
That's
but
right.
It's not. Wait, bishop c4? No, and then b5
pawn,
even.
b5 or pawn takes d5 because your bishop is out of the in front of the rook, making the queen safe on c8 for the time being. But Danya, that's why bishop f8 was so important. We often see these moves played by these top level players. I'm like, well, what are they doing? This allowed knight e4 because otherwise knight takes d5 would come with knight takes e7 check. And that way you could steal the pawn. Now the pawn can't be captured. Black, who had less space, is trading pieces. That makes perfect sense.
And another thing you often see these top players, it's not that they don't set traps. They do, but they integrate it fully within their play. They make moves that they would play anyway. They don't just set traps for the sake of setting traps. That's what makes them so tricky and good. Bishop d3. Now a trade, and I think the worst is behind Fabi, but still, white can now maybe play the move b4, which is, of course, very typical in such Queen's Gambit setups. But the b5 square is fully defended by black's pawn. So where are you going from there?
That's right. It's like a Carlsbad structure. You want to push the pawns up the board, not going, and there's b4, but you're not going to get a4, b5 anytime soon with the pawn being attacked by the bishop on f8. And watch out for a5. This is a typical plan at some point, trying to open up the queen side. The knight comes to b3 too fast to allow that to happen. So Danya, it looks like white trying to play on the queen side, black when queen e6. Maybe there's some play at some point on the king side. g5 is not out of the question, trying to expand on that side of the board.
Although if you procrastinate too long, white can park a knight on c5. And another thematic idea I've seen before, if you take on c5, white will take with the d pawn. No, white will take with the b pawn and then play rook b1. And our old friend, the bishop on f4, it's stopping black's rook from coming to b8, which is going to make it harder to defend the b7 pawn. There it is, knight c5. Fabi might have to move his queen back. I don't know if you can allow the transformation of the pawn structure.
Yeah, you got to back it up. Queen c8 looks like the move here. Queen e7, also a possibility, but I don't like trapping in my own bishop. So it just feels like a position where white is the one just springing to life. All the pieces are working perfectly together. It's a harmonious setup. If you have queen c8, that rook on a8, it continues to be a problem. But don't count out the maneuver knight d6, knight c4, pawn b5, because if black can stabilize that knight on c4 and then play a5, it's black who's the one who actually used the queen side and the extra pawn on that side of the board to his advantage.
And don't forget about the king side, stuff could still happen there. And I have seen a lot of Carlsbad games that have this sort of trajectory, Robert, where it looks like white's dominating, but black doesn't have any targets, and eventually something happens. Black gets a knight to c4, and things start turning around. Amin wants to avoid that. That's why he keeps his foot on the gas pedal. But still, Fabi could go knight c4 in this position, and will Amin push his pawn all the way to e5? That doesn't look particularly enticing.
That's right, because if you play e5, you'll need a pawn to f5, but now your bishop on f4, which we've been praising, is in the way.
Right.
So, and taking on d6 ever would have been a mistake with the exposed dark square. So knight c4, step one. If e takes d5, it looks like you're just simply, trading some pieces. Rook e1 first, so I don't drop b7. Rook takes e1, pawn takes d5 here. b6 is next, kicking the knight out of there. The knight on c4 is here to stay. Black would have the upper hand.
Exactly. And what's also important, this pawn on b4, it looks very fancy. Oh, white's got these two pawns supporting the knight. No, white would wish that the pawn is actually on b2 so that he can play b3. Very important. These two squares are not equivalent because black, as you said, can play b6 at the right moment to kick the knight out of c5. And there it is. And dare I say, I think Fabi the momentum is on black's side right now.
Yes, he's showing tremendous understanding that even if the queen had to go back to c8, the bishop went back to f8. Black was playing these quiet moves, saying, come at me. And once you go forward, now you're actually creating holes in your own position. As you point out, pawns like this, b4 and d4, the square in between them is susceptible to being overtaken by Black's pieces. And that's why the knight did come into c4, can be reinforced b5 if necessary, but I like b6. We're talking about how White would like to play b3. Black has that option. It's looking good for Fabi, and they both have 6+ minutes. So, Danya, do you think we should head around to another game while we have a moment here? Okay.
Let's do it.
Let's see. So many options right now. I see that.
Jeez.
Let's go to Jose Martinez.
Oh, by the way, I think Nepo lost in the last round to Volkid. Well, I see the Volkid Nestoda too. So a big upset already as the Ukrainian Grandmaster dispatches Jan Panishi.
Hard to even call it an upset in these events. I mean, yes, it is by rating, but we know how strong Volokhin is. And he's like the team champion winner. I'm pretty sure in team championships, he has maybe the best performance rating of like anybody. Yep. He just wins nonstop for the Ukrainian team. And we are in the game between Jospim and Anish Giri. That is Jose Martinez with the white pieces, the Peruvian Grandmaster taking on the legendary Dutch top player. And hey, Danya, when I look at this position, I see opposite colored bishops, the bishop on c6, anchored by the pawn d5. It looks better for White, at least optically. And yet we see the evaluation bar say that Anish's position is better.
Yeah, I mean, Black has all these dark squares, and Black has a lot of potential on the queen side, both in terms of going a3 and potentially even b3 to blast things open. Maybe not yet, but White has a much harder time getting things going on the king side. Maybe rook f1 is a thought here, where the idea of sacking on f6. Yeah, looks great for White, but I don't know if I agree with the eval bar. I feel like it's a lot more double-edged than the eval bar is making it out to be, but well, Jospin taking his time here.
One thing that just happened was h5 by Anish Giri. He's showing that if somebody's about to attack you with g4 pawn pushes, that you can actually move your pawn in front of your king, which you're told not to do. But he has an outpost. And actually, this bishop on c6 probably wants to be back somewhere like on g2. And it's out of play for the time being. Anish opening up his bishop to this g3 pawn. Mm-hmm. And if you take on d6, we're going to get a bishop that's not quite in the game against a knight that is on a dark square, can go to g4 at some point. And as you mentioned, a3 and b3 still both available to Black.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where the bishop looks very nice, but it's sort of imprisoned on an outpost. And it can't do anything other than just sort of sit there on c6. I think that's actually one of the reasons why Black's position actually might be objectively better. At first, I thought White was up a pawn. It almost looks that way, but he's not. Material is equal, and the time situation is not equal. Jospin, it's getting a little bit concerning. Anish has managed this time. So in general, Anish manages his time incredibly well. I think that's not often talked about, but it's one of his strengths.
Oh, and one of Jospin's strength is tactical vision. He goes rook f1, trying to get away with rook takes f6. Not so fast as Anish. Quickly queen e7. And this is how you win rapid and blitz events. You make important decisions quickly. He says, I'm not going to allow rook takes f6, so I have to be worried about a kingside attack. I am just going to protect that. My bishop's still defended. G3 is still under attack. And now what next from Jose? That's the big question. I would play queen e3, slide my queen up just to look at that rook and open up rook takes f6 once more.
Oh, and if bishop c5 there, then d6. Mm-hmm. Don't fall into one move-itis. You might say, oh, I'm attacking the queen. d6, bishop takes c3, de, and there's trouble because the rook and the bishop are both hanging.
That's right. And he plays knight e3 instead.
I thought about it, getting the knight to f5. But, I mean, knight f5 in and of itself is not such a huge threat. a3, preparing to meet knight f5 with queen e5. Look at Anish playing this at exactly the nastiest moment. And I think Jospin, you might have to keep that knight on e3 so he can go to c4 in case the queen appears on e5.
Right, because knight f5, queen e5, you're welcoming the queen to the square it already wants to go to, threatening checkmate here. This is looking almost over. And even if you gave Jospin another 10 minutes on the clock, I would still say Anish is just cruising here. A3, queen e5, take over the dark squares, ignore this g3 pawn. Who cares about that pawn? Now take on b2. Maybe there's rook takes a2 coming with queen a7. Like your king is just too exposed where it is on the queen side.
Yeah, Jose shaking his head. So many tactics on the queen side. There's queen e3. Of course, he's hoping against hope for bishop c5, which Anish is not going to play. But knight takes d6 right now is a threat because the queen on e7 is going to be overloaded. So care has to be exercised by Anish. Is knight g4 a possibility here? I guess then the queen slides into d4. It's not over yet. It's not over.
Oh my gosh, what a move.
Rook A3.
He says, take my rook.
Kidding me?
Look at this pawn on B2 and look at the complete control.
The whole construction.
The bishop,
the whole construction.
Look at all the dark squares. And oh my gosh, rook A3. What a move.
Where did that come from? That's such a mature positional decision. It's so hard to realize, oh, I'm down in exchange. And it's not like, here's the crucial thing, Robert. It's not like black has checkmate. It's just the control over the squares and the control on the queen side that yields such great compensation. And white actually has connected passers. It's just that black has such dominance over the dark squares that Anish says they ain't going nowhere.
Nowhere. And it's funny because black's best move is throw this B2 pawn off the board. Like, get out of here. Let's open up some files. Right. But that pawn is an umbrella. It shields the white king. And yet the position still is so much better for black because are you really trying to get C5? Not so fast. My bishop can go there right now. And so as long as Anish doesn't allow those pawns forward, he should have the edge. But that's what Jose is going to put all his attention towards, is somehow attacking E4. Do not take it right now because queen E4 is a trade. And then knight F2 is a fork that picks up one of the rooks for the knight. G3 falls, H4 falls, and the whole pawn situation is not very good for white. And this B2 pawn is very important because that means there's always going to be back rank problems. So wait, did that just happen?
I think it did. And I think Jose is banking on, yeah, it did happen. I think he's banking on his passers, but once again, where are they going? And if the rooks are traded, Robert, that move H5 by Anish, such a Prussian and such a typical grandmaster decision, pushing a pawn on the same side where your king is, but now it's paying tremendous dividends because white's pawns are kind of frozen on dark squares. Maybe Josman has to go G4, but then after the trade, black has yet another passer on F7. So let's see how white sets up the defense.
Well, I mean, he brought his rook to E8 eventually, but if the rook ever leaves, there's rook E7, rook E1.
E7.
So bishop takes G3 now possible because the bishop can't move, and C5 not available because the bishop hangs. I mean, I
forgot that the bishop hangs. Yeah, I think you can just take.
Yeah, and you know what you could also do is play rook E7. I mean, if the rooks are traded, this is over. It just, you win G3, you win H4. As long as you don't let those pawns promote, which you won't, you play F5, you're going to have a million extra pawns.
Yeah, and as they say in Russian, trousers, right? You have a pawn on B2. If you have a passer on the other side of the board, white's king is permanently anchored to that pawn on B2. It can't move anywhere.
No, I really like that expression, by the way. And wait, he goes rook.
It's good. It's good, isn't it? Back to D6.
He wants that. So bishop D6, then bring your rook to E7, then bring that rook down the board.
The immediate rook E7 is not out of the question here. Rook takes A3, rook E2 check, and he plays it. I think this works. And then bishop E5. And you can't stop rook E1 and rook C1.
He won the game. Rook B3 would be the only way. The game is over, but rook B3, rook E1 check, king C2, rook C1 check, force that king away somewhere. And then once the king goes, you get a queen, you are up a rook, you win this endgame. So nicely done by Nishikori. What a masterclass. Incredible.
Great games can't happen in that 10-minute time control. Nishikori says, what? Say that again, please. You sure? You sure want to keep saying that after this game? Great effort for Anish, who jumps out to 3 out of 3. He beats Josman, who is such a juggernaut in blitz and rapid. And here we're watching Vidit against Prague, all India matchup, a rematch from their Tata Steel game where Prague pulled out an absolutely incredible victory. And this one looks like it's heading toward a peaceful result.
It is. So let's head away from here. I just clicked it on games at random. This one's going to be a draw, opposite colored bishops. 5-minute Caruana deep in this game against a meantime. It's like, what an end game position.
What a position.
it's even material, Danya, somehow, and the pawns are all over the board. There's a past A pawn, there's a past E pawn. There's a king on E6 blockading, a king on F3 blocking. So as long as rook takes E5 is not playing, but G5 is also an option if the king goes to F3.
Yeah, and some sort of a breakthrough with G5, H4. White has to be very cautious about. But I think if Amin is careful, if he meets king F5 with king F3, it's a draw. And yeah, Fabi accepting the draw here.
Okay, so let's go to our top board. Naroditsky Rusitarov well ahead in the clock, well ahead in the position. He has a bishop on F6. Unlike the bishop we saw in Jose Martinez's game,
over.
This one's really good on F6.
It's over. And look at the time situation. The fact that Andre has 30 seconds in any kind of endgame like this, there's just no way that he pulls this one out.
No. And
with no increment.
Where is this knight going? It's fine on there. It goes to D5, but I was trying to figure out where to next. So say the rook comes to C6 or up to A4. You don't want to drop F4, so probably just defend that pawn somehow, but don't go king F3. That's a bad square to go to. You walk into a pin.
You do. So maybe even rook f1 kind of looks ugly, gets the rook off of the g file, but it is important to reinforce the f pawn. Yeah, he goes king e3. I thought briefly c4, but then white can just play d4, and that bishop from f8 is never going to activate itself. No, that's it. This is resignable.
And there's no time for black and no time. Moves. What move do you make? I don't see a single.
You're paralyzed. Rook d4.
Oh, knight c3 and bishop d8. Knight c3, bishop d8.
Oh.
97.
97 would have moved. Bishop takes c7 to rook g7. And the knight swinging to h8.
But he's just flagging him at this point. Like,
yeah,
knight
but that's still so cool.
Go knight f7. Like, you can make any move.
Anything. Rook g8. Yeah.
But I think objectively, 97 was a good move.
No, it was. Maybe just knight takes f8 would have been better.
Yeah, and he could go knight to c6. And I mean, he was making good moves. It just looked very funny.
Yeah, I mean, this was a sign of utmost confidence. You're flagging your opponent, and you're just happening to make brilliant moves anyway.
And then we have this game, which is like a very normal-looking game. And get white down under 30 seconds. What is Rachmanov doing? He needs to move. He's playing against Alexandra.
Alexandra is up a full minute on the clock, and she is a monster blitz player. And he's also in trouble on the position, Robert. If you think about it, that knight on b3 is doing hero's work. It's just pressuring the position. It's guarding the pawn on d4. Alexandra is going to win b5. No, he's not going to make it. He's got 13 seconds. What is he doing?
How could he spend all that time? There's no increment.
No, this is... I almost think the players maybe are forgetting that there's no increment, but how is he expecting to pull this one out?
And Alexandra, because they're way too experienced, she's not going to offer a draw. Yeah. But she blunders.
Oh my God, bishop d6.
But he's
the same. But that's a terrible move. Wait, he didn't take the knight.
Oh my God.
Now he's not going to make it, I think, but he's pre-moving. He has to take both of the pawns, Robert.
No way.
Alexandra, she has to keep the pawns, king e8. She makes it in time. He's not going to be able to trade. King f6.
King. Oh my God.
He's got to pre-move it. Oh my God. How does Alexandra keep at least a pawn? That's the whole point. You have to keep
he makes the draw. He makes it.
Oh my God.
He made the draw.
Alexandra is going to be kicking herself for that one.
Oh my God.
She just had to hold out for like 2 more moves, and she gave up her pawns.
No, save. Danya, like, this is weird to talk about because it's flagging technique. Around here, she had to play knight d7 check.
Knight d7.
You need to keep this king out of f6. Even king f7 would have been a good move because white was undoubtedly trying to bring this king somewhere. So just keep that
white had pre-moved king f6, so even not allowing one pre-move, white would have spent another second. The game would have been over. Oh, missed opportunity for Kosteniuk, who managed her time so well, but stumbled in the end. Okay, we have Drev against Matlakov here. It's over.
Yeah. So, wow, all the games are in the books, Danya. All of them are done with.
All of the games are in the books. Another blistering round. We got Noterbeck on 3 out of 3 together with several players, including Geary. But we are going to go on a minute-long break. And when we come back, we are going to watch round 4. You are watching Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Back in 60 seconds. Welcome back to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Robert Hess and Daniel Naroditsky bringing you the action from this inaugural weekend. And round 4 is underway. We've got a couple of players, Robert, on 3 out of 3, and that field thinned out quick. And what a matchup. Paravian against world rapid champion Abdusattorov, who won such a nice game in the last round.
Yes, and David Paravian, we haven't even caught any of his games thus far, but we know he's a speed demon. He's so good in the blitz time controls here on chess.com. And in this game, this is a very topical line. Currently, white is a pawn ahead and has the bishop pair, but down goes the pawn on c6. And these lines are known to be, with best play, should be a hold for black. But what do you make of the decision by Paravian to minimize any risk?
No, I meant to say I don't like the decision for Naroditsky. Because this is exactly, in my experience, this is exactly the kind of position where it's so easy to stumble in a short time control game. Black has to try to trade one of the bishops, because as long as white keeps the two bishops and they're running amok around the entire board, black has so much to keep track of. You're pointing out the c7 pawn. If you move the queen to the b file, white's going to go rook a b1 and keep harassing him. It should be holdable, no question about it. But I think it's already getting pretty unpleasant. Maybe queen c5 has to be played.
Yeah, queen c5, and then honestly, there's other types of positions where end games, the bishops just slice through the position. So I'm already looking
good at
queen e5, because if you take c2, I bring a rook to c1, I get c7, everything's opening up. Guess who that favors? The bishop pair.
These young players, I'm not satisfied, with the opening choices, of the young players today. It's not practical. It's not simply not practical. If I play this against Korpov, I would have, my coaches would have, killed me. This is totally impractical.
Well, I would love to see
to throw it in.
Not just your impression, but the real Gary come on and play in one of these tournaments. Yeah. He's invited.
He's in the top 100.
Of course, he can play whatever he wants. But this game, I agree with you that this is not the type of position you ever want. And look at the time. We've seen Naroditsky up about 2.5 minutes in most of the games thus far. Now he's the one down on the clock. His opponent's the bishop pair. The c7 pawn is weak. Bishops are just better when there's an open board, and the knight will be slow to work its way to the queen side.
And, Paravian is actually one of the most underrated blitz and bullet players. I've played him in bullet. I think I'm not the worst judge of bullet strength. And he is so fast, and he's such a practical player, very unique style. He has interesting opening prep. Most players in the audience, most people in the audience probably not too familiar with his games, but do not sleep on Grandmaster David Paravian.
No, and I don't think that anybody is. He's 3 out of 3. He's looking like he's off to a great start and trying to make his way to the knockout. And right now, the bishop on e5, hitting the knight, hitting the pawn on c7. If you say, oh, there's a pawn hanging, let me take it. In comes a rook to c1. I'm not sure which one is better. Let's go rook fc1, just because I want to keep my a2 pawn defended. Then this rook lands on c7, and it's very clear that white is the side for choice.
Indeed. And as Naroditsky contemplates how to best position his defenses, shall we briefly check into Anish Giri's game? Because he is the only other player on 3 out of 3.
Yeah, and he drops down to play an unknown player
with 2.5. Yeah.
Nobody knows of Wesley So. And look at the cat in the avatar. Wesley had an unfortunate round in the Grand Prix in the Rapid event, actually, because he lost the tiebreaker to Leonard Dominguez. And so he comes back. He's trying to make his mark here in the Rapid Chess Championship. So let's see, Wesley, 2.5 out of 3, has the black pieces. Danya, at first glance, it looks like black is doing everything wrong. And then I remember it's Wesley So playing. He probably had looked at this and has it worked out.
Yeah, he probably does, but it's still a little bit unpleasant to me. I mean, white's only issue is that the rook on e3 is a little bit stranded in the center. But one idea could be to go queen d2 and then, Anish actually trying to attend to that problem. He goes f4, pretty committal, but that looks like a great move. G takes f3, G takes f3, and then the other pawn could potentially get to f4. Yeah, I don't know, though.
He fixes pawn structure. I mean,
complicated.
It is complicated for sure, but he does fix the pawn structure. And how does black actually attack? If you play rook g8 going for g3, f4 happens. I know you allow knight g4 check, but after bishop g4, we have a position where the knight isn't great right now, but it has more potential than a bishop on the light squares in this position.
It has tremendous potential. It can jump to f5 and just look at white's center. White has more control over key central squares. White's king is pretty much safe on f2. On h2, that rook on e3, defending c3, defending g3. I think white's more or less in the driver's seat, but anything can happen in the next couple of moves.
And that's why knight g6 was the choice of Wesley. He said, I'm not just going to have a bishop knight position. I am going to offer a trade, but your knight f5 move is possible. Knight g2 back to play f4 and try to play f5 with a baby fork of the minor pieces. So it looks like white has some options. And once again, Anish doing well on the clock.
Yeah, he is. And again, his time management, almost always exquisite. He rarely puts himself in very serious time pressure, but a big decision to make here. What does white do with that tension? And there's the answer. He drops the knight back to G2. Could Wesley contemplate the move F5 here, trying to continue opening the position up? Risky, but interesting. Maybe
Sometimes
rook E8.
you got to risk it to get the biscuit. An F5 here, that looks interesting. Rook E8, as you mentioned, another option. I'm also thinking long term. Am I going to get H5, H4, or is the king on H8 just going to be too exposed? So he chooses your move, F5. And Danya, I mean, I like the look of it. He's putting up a huge fight, but I still have to like white's position in the event that, let's say we trade on F5. My rook on E3 is so well placed. I'll play queen D2. I'll bring my rook to E1.
Yeah.
And then I'll think about what to do with my bishop, but I'm controlling the open file, and the H6 pawn needs attending to, so the queen on G7 is stuck in place.
And the F3 pawn is a passer. That might seem completely irrelevant right now, but you have to keep track of those things in the event of an endgame. Okay, so they're following that line. Bishop comes to E4. That move F4, very, very committal. He does weaken the E4 square. And there are some storm clouds circling around white's king. Maybe D5 to anchor the bishop. It's very hard to put a finger on the pulse of this position.
I like D5 a lot. And I think for white, one of the moves that will be a nice way to try to liquidate a bit and stop black from just going on for attack is bishop H5, just pinning that knight, maybe even capturing it, and then allowing you to double on the E file. So rook G1 was needed to defend this knight because bishop takes G2 was a threat, trying to get against at this white king. But for the time being, white is safe and sound, and Anish up 1.5 minutes.
Yeah, he is. And Wesley taking his time here. I think D5 is essentially asking to be played. What else is he thinking about? Well, there's other candidate moves, rook E7, maybe even H5 in some positions, as you indicated. Stuff needs to be thought about. Wesley, he still hasn't spent half his time, so not a big concern yet. And he judges this to be a critical moment, but he goes for D5.
I would play bishop H5, but it is a pretty committal move because you're probably going to take on G6 at some point, which I'm not sure you want to do now that the bishop is anchored in on the E4 square. So white's king in worse shape than black's at the moment. I
don't like the move F4 by Anish. I feel like he was premature. I don't like it at all. I feel like he's given Wesley all the good stuff here, that huge square on E4. Your approach, queen D2, rook E1, gradually get the pieces in. I think he jumped the gun a little bit.
Yeah, there was no rush. I mean, it's not like black is going to attack the white king here. There's no threats. The knight comes to E5, then you can play F4 to kick that knight out. So right. I agree. I think he just allowed Wesley too much play.
Yep. And rook E6, the other rook potentially could come to F5, although, of course, not yet because the bishop will drop back to G4 with a pin.
Although
skewer, I don't know how to call that.
Bishop, if you go rook F5, it's white's turn, like B4, rook F5, bishop B4, there's knight E5. Because
no,
somehow this doesn't work.
No, bishop F5.
Oh, the F3 is covered by the rook.
You thought that F3 was a fork.
Yeah, I was like, I have a fork, so I need to move the rook away. But okay, so there's my blunders in full force. First big one of the day.
Well, I'm going to throw you a bit of a save. There are what you're trying to show is the general tactical patterns in the position. You're not suggesting that this one in particular works.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I can be nice sometimes, just occasionally.
I do appreciate you trying to save me there, but I earned that one. So that was an oversight for getting the rook defends the F3 square. But yes, the point does hold that at some point this knight can move if there are pieces along the G file. But queen E2, that's a very neat move. It's keeping all the pieces connected. The rook, the queen, the bishop, all protecting one another. And it's about this knight on G2. That's the one problematic piece in white's position. Otherwise, he could probably claim an edge.
Yeah, I say that bad bishops defend good pawns, but that bad knights can defend good pawns too. That knight is reinforcing the F4 pawn and preventing various tactics related to a knight sacrifice on F4. Very hard to make sense of what the plan should be for either side here, Robert. It's one of those cat and mouse positions where, both sides try to make improvements, and you have to be incredibly alert for tactical opportunities, particularly if you're Wesley, because white's king is definitely the weaker of the two.
That's right. So B4, I just threw in B4 as a random move. It turns out
I was thinking about that.
It's a good move. I was just playing on that side of the board to try to make a point. And so B4 played. And what is the idea behind B4? He's still not allowing any C5 and then D4 from black, because that pawn is a passed pawn. It anchors the bishop. But we haven't talked about that. Could be something that white needs to be on the lookout for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, maybe even c6 is an idea, and then b6 and c5. And that's the thing, this is not the kind of position where either player is in a huge rush. I don't think either of the players can be in a huge rush. I really don't see any cataclysmic way to improve the position. Queen g4, but Anisha's trying. Rook takes c4 is now a big threat. Wesley returns to g8, and maybe he'll drop the queen back to e2, poking and prodding. Who flinches first here?
It's going to be me. I promise you. I think I'm going to finish first. I mean, this
good
position,
one.
this
good
position
one.
looks super, super sharp. And the rook coming to g8 here. Look at this. If the queen moves off the g file for black, then there's going to be some discoveries over here. So, I mean, Danya, it's really complex. I'm thinking it's white's turn, knight h4.
I was thinking about that.
Okay.
Yeah. Then if you have a trade, he goes rook g to e1, putting more pressure on the bishop. That bishop is screwed in so tight. It's strapped in by the pawn on d5. It ain't going anywhere in the next couple of moves, at least.
No. And this knight on g2 remains the one piece I want to improve. And what trades do we want to see? Like bishop takes g6 is available since a knight move is a threat. So does white want to take on g6? I don't really want to, because the bishop on e4 remains a beast.
And then rook takes g6 supercharges black's pressure onto the g3 pawn. But he does take, and I don't know, do you want a queen trade? I don't know. Maybe queen f8. But if you do trade queens, then you could reposition your rook to c6. There's a case to be made for that as well.
Okay, well, he goes for that. Well, you have to be very careful. If this rook moves knight f8, then knight g6 is a threat. Exactly. Same page. But look at this knight coming to e5.
I don't love the queen trade. I feel like, Robert, you called it. The moment the knight gets active, the tenor of the position, the tone of the position changes completely. That bishop on e4 starts looking a whole lot less impressive in comparison to that knight. Where's the knight going, e5 or d4?
Maybe d2. No, don't forget a knight retreat to
get rid of the bishop. Finally.
Oh man, I think knight d2 is actually a good move. It wasn't. I only thought about it because you said where's it going. I was like, well, obviously e5 or d4. And then Nishikiri playing just these moves so quickly. Now
4 minutes.
Up. Where does it go? Does it go to e8 with check? He stops. Well, he plays c4 first.
Ooh, he's going after that a3 pawn, which I think we all kind of forgot about.
Yep.
Maybe even Wesley forgot about it. But you know who didn't forget about it? Mr. Geary.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
And okay, b4 is under attack. If you play b5, thinking you have connected pawns, d takes c4 removes the defender. So b5, not a possibility. Rook b1, don't play that. That hangs a rook. Nope. That leaves rook b3, but you don't really want to make that move, though the knight, if it gets to c4, will then take on a3.
Oh, that's such a nice move by Wesley. Rook b6. It's hard to spot these kinds of amorphous moves that, just attack a pawn, but he notices that he can use the tension against c4 to his advantage. Maybe rook e5, but then that slithery bishop can slide into c2, for example.
Mm-hmm. Oh, gosh. I think if I'm a niche, because I'm up a minute, I play rook b3. Just don't give black any clear play. Like, as long as you can keep some of the tension, I think it's better. He allows rook takes b4, and that rook comes to b2.
I don't know about that. He grabs all the pawns, rook b2. He wants to play rook e2, but then the other rook could move on to d7 and try to pick up the d5 pawn. How do you defend it?
Because rook a5, there's b6. Get that rook right out of there.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Does white have a move? Do you have to play rook e3 and just give up all of your pawns?
Yeah, but then, I mean, oh, come on.
Oh, man, draw.
Just do that.
Just when. Okay.
Honestly, though, the position, is equal. Draw agreed.
Just when the marrow of the position is about to be extracted, but Fabiano against Sigurov here.
Trouble for Fabi.
And wait a minute. Did Fabi, he drew twice or did he lose a game? What am I missing?
He drew twice.
He drew twice. That's right.
Against Tabatabai and forgetting who else he drew again.
And then he drew the previous game. But is he in trouble here? He is in massive trouble. Look at the pressure the black is exerting on white's position from all angles.
This looks as bad as it gets.
Takes and rook f4 looks interesting. I'm sure the black has a concrete win, maybe g5. But then that allows white to lock the position a little bit with g4. Not that that's good.
Mm-hmm. He takes, he's going to rook f4 for sure.
Yeah.
And rook g4, not just taking the bishop.
Bishop f3 you have to play.
And you would love to play e4 for black, but your rook is loose. So you don't have time to just push forward there. But how do you, it feels like it's just dominating, but what's the next?
Maybe just rook b2. You know, sometimes in these positions, what you want to do is just go after some pawns. You know, so that's one idea. I was even thinking about going queen e3. That looks really fancy, but it doesn't actually do all that much. Although it does attack the b3 pawn as well. The thing is that black doesn't want to fall asleep. His own king is not the safest piece in the world.
Such a funny move, queen e3.
e3, just using the pin.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I mean, there's a pin there. B3 is under attack. F3 is pressured. But yeah, you're right that the black king, if you take your eye away for a moment, it could come under fire. So it's one of these positions, they don't have the engine, right? So it's minus 5.4. And just
they don't? Okay.
Just to state something, so people, you know, I saw people asking before that this is played on a private server, so that, you know, the players, it's taking as much fair play precaution as possible. So that's why people are having a hard time finding it, just to make sure that no outside assistance possibly could be had. And so, no, there are no engines here, none of that sort, obviously. So black, of course, is better. Both players know that. But when you allow move like c5 at some point, then all of a sudden white can get counterplay.
Well, there is an engine. It's Geary Fish 2.0.
Oh my gosh. Is bishop g4 a threat?
It is a threat, because if you take, then rook takes f2, the triple stack, as one grandmaster likes to say, on the second rank. Rook b1, Fabi trying desperately to get this queen, shoo it away from the second rank. Rook c1. Ugh.
And look at the time, by the way.
Red.
I mean, this really is becoming anyone's game. Obviously, black is dominating, but when you start getting down on the clock and time trouble,
but Robert, e4 is coming. I think Fabi is just not going to be able to hold out here. For instance, rook e1, e4, bishop e2, and then you could even take on e2 and go rook g4 with a pin against the queen. That's just one sample line of many.
Yeah, no,
I don't see this happening.
So the point is moot, but it still needs to be said that in time trouble, if you don't find that knockout, you allow your opponent to stay in the game. It gives them chances. Here, though, Fabiano Caruana, he's out of chances. Looks like he's just done. I mean,
man, and the fact that Fabi is going to be on 50% after this game, it signifies the insane strength of this tournament.
Oh yeah, top 100 players in the world, some wild cards, top 10 juniors and women. I mean, there are no free points at all.
There's just one wild card that's not particularly good. I heard he's going to play eventually and give out some free points.
See, people think that you're talking about yourself, but I know you're talking about me. So it hurts. It hurts.
Always. Myself, I would never say such things about myself.
And look at that.
Bishop takes... Oh, you couldn't have taken on g6, because queen takes g6 to actually pin the queen to the king. Ugh.
That's right.
Everything is losing here.
But like the game is still continuing somehow. Right? Like it looks completely winning.
These players don't die. He's just continuing to make moves. And he's saying, okay, beat me.
Okay, bishop f3. Look at that move. E3. All of a sudden, if you take on f2, the black king could come under fire. So we're getting a time scramble.
I may have called it too soon, bishop f5, but the bishop coming to e4. Every time we think Fabi gets back into the game, black finds a way to tighten the screws. But Fabi is still surviving. Can you play rook takes? No, you can't play rook takes f3, nope. Queen d4. Okay. You can see the concentration. Fabi trying to find ways to keep on surviving.
King g1. Are you serious? E takes f2.
Rook takes f2, and white is still holding on.
Oh my goodness!
How is he doing this? Can black take and go? Can black just trade everything and go bishop g4 and force a winning pawn? No, but it's maybe not winning. Oh my gosh, c5 there.
But g5 is great timing, because now. Oh my gosh, can you take?
Rook f2, bishop coming to d3, Fabi with 15 seconds. When he goes rook d1, pinning the queen, queen e3, pinning the bishop.
Wait, king g2.
Oh my goodness.
And queen h3. Oh my goodness, his queen's coming in.
It's not over. His queen's coming either to e6 or to h6. How is he doing this? 15 seconds, this is anybody's game. This is a time scramble.
Take it, take the rook.
Oh my goodness, take the rook with bishop b4. Fabi saw it immediately after he played it. What's going on? 8 seconds. 7 seconds. Who's going to win this g4? Pinning the queen. Bishop f2.
2 pawn, d6, go!
Oh my goodness, d6. Push it.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
Queen. He gave a queen.
He promotes. He promoted.
But he's no time.
3 seconds. He's got 3 seconds.
Take the pawn.
Can he get the pawn? He does.
Take the pawn.
Take it. Take the pawn.
There he goes.
Oh my goodness. And it's going to be a draw.
Oh my God.
But still, how did he say that Fabi's going to be annoyed with himself that he didn't win that? Let me tell you.
That was the wildest game ever, and what a way to conclude the 4th round of this event. I mean,
unbelievable. Simply unbelievable. And that is why we watch this Rapid Chess Championship. This is just the first day of the first weekend. Ladies and gentlemen, 4 rounds are in the books. Nobody has a perfect score. We have a very tight field, so do not go anywhere. We will take a 60-second break and keep on watching. You're watching the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Back in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Robert, 4 rounds are in the books. Nobody has a perfect score. And as I said before we went on break, that is a testament to how unbelievably strong this tournament is.
Yeah, I mean, we have the best players in the world competing. Of course, not everybody is going to make every single event, but they have to play 13 because the top 13 scores in terms of getting the Grand Prix points will allow them to make their way to the top 16 finishers and ultimately to the finals. But we have Anish Giri right now with the white pieces against David Paravian. I see that Kirill Alexyenko is taking on Nordibek Abdusattorov. And so Volakitin against Amin Talbatabai. Arjun is playing Wesley So. I kind of feel like that's a game we should look at.
And Arjun also won a very small event recently by a very low margin, right? Some tournament called Tata Steel Challengers.
Yeah, not too impressive. Not a big deal. Not like he had a performance rating that was sky high. Not that it matters that he made the top group for next year. And also he earned the praise of Magnus Carlsen, saying that Arjun's classical rating is not 2,700, but that's only because he hasn't been able to play enough events. He'll get there soon. So everybody has high expectations for Arjun, but he loves playing chess. He's doing great. And right now with the white piece against Wesley So, he's slightly ahead in the clock in the early stages of this game, but black is very solid here. It almost looks like white, despite having the first move, has not really taken advantage because it's a closed-looking position now. Knight F5, Danya, just guesses bishop on E3.
Well, it's the clamp on the D4 square that makes this so annoying to play for white. White would love to just free himself by pushing that pawn. That's never going to happen. Black has a million defenders on it. So Arjun has to kind of work around Black's central clamp. He goes bishop C5. White is, of course, very solid. There are no real targets, but this is a Wesley type of position.
That's right. And what Arjun is hoping is for a move like B6, because the bishop on G2, suddenly it comes to life and there's issues down the long diagonal. So I would not play B6 right now. I feel like tactically speaking, there must be an issue. Maybe this knight moves somewhere to go after the knight on C6, but like knight H.
I don't know. That's an interesting move. Knight H4, knight takes H4, bishop C6. Okay, complicated. Position complicated, but okay. Bishop D7, bishop takes A8. Yeah, even okay.
Wild.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. But I think if this works out for black, I would consider B6. Yeah. Because the thing is, if white drops the bishop back to A3, then black fianchettos, and that's a double-sided sword. If black can orchestrate the trade of light squared bishop, white's going to be in big trouble. And I think Wesley's preparing B6.
Yeah, I think rook B8 is a smart move, and he played it relatively quickly. And that's what these best players do, is they don't spend all of their time trying to find that precise move this early. Yeah, exactly. You have to be practical. You have to play great moves quickly rather than the best move extremely slowly when you only have 10 minutes and no increments. So C3 played here by Arjun. You made a point, the D4 square under black's control. Now at least white's putting up a fight, but D4 itself is not going to be easy to play since all of black's pieces are staring at the square.
Indeed. And the bishop on A3, it's an interesting piece. I don't think it's bad and I don't think it's good. It's hard to say because it is slicing through the position, making it a little bit harder for black to coordinate, covering the E7 square. Maybe black would have liked to put a knight or a queen there, and black can still put a knight there. On the other hand, the bishop isn't really participating in society. But later on in the game, of course, white could play B3, and the bishop could rejoin the game via C1. Although B3 is a move that comes with, certain consequences as well. It weakens the position.
Right, because as soon as I see the move B3, I'm thinking of playing B4 for black because I want to get that D4 square we keep talking about. Now, H4 and H5 have been included. The knight goes back to H6. Tanya, I mean, the position, now it's starting to really get double-edged. And here for white, what to do, right? I could put
I would consider B3. I would, now that the G5 square, B4.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry,
no, I mean, I really like it. I mean, I was also getting excited here because B4, bishop C1 played quickly. Arjun now up 40 seconds on the clock, and his pieces are starting to come to life. He can play B5, and if this knight is removed from C6, then he can even play C4 because the D4 square isn't that scary to give up control over.
And the move H5 by Wesley, very committal, because now if he goes F5, he weakens the G5 square tremendously, and white can plant that knight there. And it almost seems like a knight on G5 is somehow going to be stronger than a knight on G4. Wesley trying to create tension on the other side of the board. Arjun could simply go A3, or he could go B5. Yep, he goes B5, but will he follow up with C4 or A4? C4 weakens the D4 square.
I like a4.
Yeah, a4.
And if you ever play c6 for black, then b6 becomes a target. So it's one of these decisions you want to open up the board, but you do not want to give white a target. Because knight f5 here. So look at black's knights coming in here, but white's knights also.
Bishop g5. You can play bishop g5, induce f6, and then drop the bishop back to c1. Kind of a typical grandmaster idea. I'm not sure that f6 is all that bad for black. Wesley could drop the knight from f5 backward to d6, trying to diffuse the flames of white's initiative in the center. It's a very complex position. I don't know who's better.
But he does exactly what you called for. And as you said, knight d6 is an option right now. There's something to be said, though. This bishop on b7 a little bit loose. So you have to watch out for tactics involving both knights jumping. And here comes knight g5. Knight g5.
Knight g5, he blunders?
Yep. I was just talking about the bishop being loose.
Here's the amazing thing. If you say, it's okay, I won't take the knight. No, knight takes f6 check. Oh, my lands, what a blunder by Wesley.
Yeah, it's just immediately blundering this bishop on b7 here.
Arjun sees it.
Yeah, for sure.
This is an elementary tactic. That bishop, every time you have an undefended piece that's being x-rayed by another piece, Robert, you got to pay attention to that. Wesley completely forgets about it. Uncharacteristic blunder by Wesley.
And helps.
This is winning, completely winning for white now.
Yeah, it helps to.
This isn't just a pawn.
It's not at all. And it helps just to be on the lookout. You say this very often in your instructive videos, loose pieces drop off here, the bishop on b7. And actually, you helped this come to mind for me because you were talking about this idea of knight d6, which is a perfectly reasonable type of move. And I was thinking, if knight takes d6, can you take with the queen to keep the pressure going? Or will there be a problem with the bishop staring at each other? So it became apparent to me that the bishop on b7 not being defended was an issue. Here we see that Wesley, he falls right into it. Arjun, you don't need to ask him twice to find impressive tactics. And Daniel, one other thing we didn't talk about is the a2 g8 diagonal. You were talking about inducing the move f6, and one of the big pluses for white is that the king on g8 now is not very safe there, in addition to the bishop falling on b7.
Great point. And that's why it's important to realize that it's not just that black loses a pawn. Black loses the entire position. All of these, once the light squared bishop disappears, it greatly exacerbates, as you said, the weakness of the a2 g8 diagonal and the long diagonal. This is absolutely miserable for black. And it's just bad luck. After knight g5, it's just immediately totally lost.
And, if Magnus Carlsen's out there watching this game, he's probably like, told you. I told you, Arjun Erigaisi, that guy is super strong, only 18 years old. And everyone was talking about his blitz and rapid strength because he won the Tata Steel India events. He tied for first in one and won the other. And so he is just, he's a force, especially in the quicker time controls, but also now we see it in classical chess. And Wesley So is feeling this over the board right now. The bishop on b7 is lost.
And we've seen him terrorizing the JSCC as well. Not a coincidence, it's Wesley. You can just sense the frustration in his body language as he plays from his hotel room in Berlin, where he was knocked out yesterday by Lenier Dominguez. Is that impacting him? I don't really think so. These players, especially someone like Wesley, he's so level-headed. He knows how to push it away. Something a little bit off about his form yesterday, and it seems today as well. He bites the bullet. Knight takes f6. Here it comes. And after bishop takes b7, white is also going to be threatening to drop the bishop back to c6 with a pin against the queen.
Yeah, that's a problem. You're going to lose an exchange there. If you take on g5, in comes the next bishop, and all your rooks are under attack.
That's a skewer, right? Bishop 6 technically is a skewer. If the more valuable piece is in front, it's a skewer.
That's right.
See, sometimes even GMs need to be reminded of this.
But you corrected yourself, and you asked when you weren't certain. See, that is an important lesson for many people.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, and what? I'm listening.
But I always say this, why I confuse the two terms.
No, why?
Because in Russian, it's one word. It's pin and skewer. There's no distinction between the two words. It's one word. So, and I, of course, grew up learning these terms in Russian, so I always confuse it. Well, and I have something fascinating to say about this.
Go for it. Teach us
really quickly, as Arjun. This is not chess related, but I had a professor in college who ran a really interesting experiment. So in Russian, there is a word for blue, and then there is one word for light blue. Like you refer to the sky not as blue, but as light blue. And he ran an experiment where he actually saw if native Russian speakers were better at distinguishing different shades of blue, objectively speaking, and he found that they actually were, because there's this additional word. So this thing actually exists. It was a fascinating experiment.
as I've learned throughout the years, just reading tons of different pieces, that other languages tend to have more words, for when English would describe it with 4 different words. So I appreciate those stories, Danya. I don't think that Wesley appreciates his position. He put his king on H.
Good segue.
Oof, all the problems exist. White's up a pawn. It's going from bad to worse, I would say.
That sound perfectly characterizes the suffering that Wesley is going through. Queen b3 is another idea. Both preparing bishop a3 and knight e6, forking him this way and that way. No, he takes on e5. So he actually goes very concrete approach. Okay, so rook takes d1, knight takes c5.
There's f. Oh, you're saying there's
Queen
no
c5
f4.
check. Queen c5 check. Be careful.
That's a good point. And actually, then all
maybe
of a sudden,
knight f
White's king e3. Knight f3 looks great. Bishop f4 can't be wrong.
But then queen c5.
But bishop f4, queen c5. You're going for my f2 pawn, but knight e4
bishop e5, knight e6.
That's even better. I was saying knight e4 at a minimum just to defend everything. But as you're pointing out, bishop e5, knight takes, knight e6 is a big problem for black, losing everything.
Yeah, literally everything. Rook, the knight. And Arjun, d takes e5, very committal decision, but he's got enough firepower to carry him through the finish line here, I think.
And queen d5, look at that nice move, because the queen can try to come to e6, trying to force a queen trade. Bishop f4 can happen next. As long as you don't allow this bishop to move away with check, then the rook is winning the showdown with the queen on the e file.
Knight e6, bishop g5.
Whoa, knight h4.
Wesley.
Played. He's trying to get bishop h2.
Not going to go gentle into that good knight.
Wait, that actually probably was something that Arjun wasn't entirely expecting, because it's a sacrifice, and now he's thinking, and he plays f4, because if bishop d4, we said you don't want to allow a check, but there's a counter check after queen takes d4, the king on h8 is under attack. So that would be a free piece, and thus the game in 2 pieces, because the knight h4 would be lost next. So,
and that's nasty, because if White had gone king f1 after bishop d4 check, knight h2 is mate.
Oh
so
my goodness,
this is an important resource.
Wow. So f4 spotted by Arjun. He knew his position was winning. He finds the knockout here, and it's just going to win a piece. And just to show you why the knight wasn't captured, bishop h2 check is a big problem, because king f1, yes, it defends the rook, but it doesn't stop rook takes f2 with check and mate. So that's how swiftly the game can end if you're not looking out for your king safety. Knight went back to f5, and Danya, I would probably just play rook takes e5 and trade queens, because I know that's winning, but maybe pawn takes e5 is objectively better. But yeah,
I love rook takes e5. That's a very practical decision. And that's it. I mean, the red carpet has been rolled out for the e5 pawn. Maybe bishop a3 here to start. You can probably play e6 and allow knight e2 check. And Arjun's going to take, look at how he's managed this time. He's got almost half of his time remaining. Incredible.
Yeah, he is speedy. He is strong. King g2 does the same thing as bishop a3, making sure you don't allow rook f1 and knight e2 with check to win that bishop. And now if the knight comes to e2, just e6, as you were saying, e7 next. And actually, Danya, there are positions where you don't even queen right away, because if the rook goes
knight e6,
to d8,
knight f8.
Knight, yeah, exactly. Bring the knight,
knight d8.
To d8 and
beautiful.
Or if the rook came to g8, that was your point. If rook g8, knight e6, knight f8, nicely spotted here. You're just trying to promote and cut off the rook from sacrificing himself for the new queen.
Beautiful, as they say. And what a smooth game by Arjun, who is going to win and jump to, I think, 4 out of 5.
That's correct. And well, let's head on to our other game. We know that Arjun's going to take this one. It looks like the game with Anish Giri is still going on here. So why don't we pull up that one? He is playing against who is he playing? He is playing, I just had it open and now I lost it. There it is. Okay, he is playing against David Paravian, and whoa, we're in a position where, is there just a draw right now?
I think Paravian is going to take it. We caught it right as the game concludes. And White has a completely self-sufficient situation with the rook and the rook defends the knight defends the pawn, and the king is going to defend the rook. So Black really doesn't have any fork tries. A draw is totally reasonable in this position.
Yeah, no, if you don't take the draw immediately for Black, you're probably going to lose the game. So you take that draw instantly, and that game is done. We have the game between Naroditsky, Abusattarov with the Black pieces taking on Kirill Aleksenko with White here. And Danya, as we look at this position, White is about to grab this e4 pawn and is up a pawn in the end game. So Abusattarov, the world rapid champion, he's facing off against the one of the candidates from the 2020/21 candidates tournament, that is Kirill Alexyenko, and right now Alexyenko in the driver's seat.
He absolutely is. That rook from e4 can migrate to perhaps h5. It can start by going to e5, and it's got many different pathways it could take. Rook e5, rook g5. Black is going to aim for maximal piece activity here, try to get the king to d5. I don't think white should allow king d5. Yeah, there it is, rook e5.
Really important move by black to play h6, because your idea of rook g5, the king on h3 not in the game. So if the rook went to g5, the king walks back towards the center, and that's how white would have won. But how do you make progress from here? A takes b5, rook takes b5. I see you're going for the b7 pawn, but black's rook is about to get active at some point, trying to go down to g1. So king c6.
Yeah, it is not easy to make progress. Maybe throw an f5 at some point.
I don't like rook g7. It feels a bit passive. Maybe he's claiming that if your rook ever leaves the 5th rank, the king comes up to d5, and that should be sufficient. But I tend not to like, and look at the evaluation bar going really high here.
King c6. Now, Alexyenko is going to bring his pawn up to a5, and the point of that is to try to freeze the pawn on b7. And, of course, prepare himself for a potential scenario where you have some sort of a pawn race or a scenario where he takes the pawn on b7, but he's hesitating. He's not playing a5 yet. I think he's thinking about going f5 instead. Okay, let's see how he plays this. Rook b5, okay, so kind of back and forth for now.
Yeah, and like the rook on h5. He plays pawn h5. Interesting. And now f5. Yeah, now f5, and rook takes and rook f6 check.
Yeah, that king on c6 is so unfortunately placed. You cannot stop rook f6 and then rook g6, and it's going to be over.
And rook h7, king g4. The king finally gets back in the game. Okay, rook f6 check.
Take h6 and then go rook g6, get the king involved via g4. The pawn on h5 is going to decide the game. Wait a minute, he's got h5.
But king e6? Okay, he brings his rook down. So I think, okay, what's happening here, it's not quite a blunder, as both players thinking that the outside, the rook pawn won't be sufficient for a win. So I understand what's happening there. It happens to be, but I think we can make sense of why the players are both allowing it and then not going for it from Alexyenko's perspective.
Yeah, the thing is, white has to be absolutely sure when he commits to taking the h pawn, he has to be sure that, black's king doesn't get to the king side in time. All of these rook endgames, they say all rook endgames are a draw. And the reason we say that, kind of as a joke, is just because no matter how winning you might look, there's just such potential for all the pawns to be traded. And whoops, I let my opponent's king get to the right spot. 50 seconds, though, for Noterbeck on top of everything else. Worst comes to worst, Alexyenko can basically flag him here at this point.
Yeah, and actually, what was he doing there? I mean, he's way too strong of a player, a blitz player, and just player overall to be spending this much time. He's just going to lose.
See what to do. I mean, king c6, rook b6. He's got to do something.
But you have to go right. You have king c7. That way, there's no check. Rook b6, rook g5.
We've seen this more times than I thought, Robert. Where you can't sit until you have 15 seconds. Then rook versus rook, you're going to lose.
Did he lose connection? No, he must have lost connection. He must be off the internet.
Well, I don't think so, because he's on the call and we see his video here. But I think he's just basically resigned.
Yeah, but you can't do that, right? He's way too good. He plays online all the time. He's way too strong. Because look, the evaluation went back to even, and he thinks he's lost. I get it, but you're going to lose on time now for sure versus having a chance in some of these end games.
Absolutely, rook b6. Nah, he's lost anyway. Surprising there. Yeah, it must have been connection. He is lagging just a little bit. We see some of his time at it as he resigns. Alexyenko wins, and a frustrating loss for Abdusattorov, who remains on 3.5 out of 5.
That's right. And we have Volokitin. He's playing Amin Tabatabai, and they're about to enter a huge time scramble, but it's Amin who has the advantage with the rook against a knight. But those pass pawns look scary. It looks like black's pawns are good as well. Oh, but time.
He takes f4 and d4, but white's knight is basically stuck defending the h pawn. And as soon as black takes the h pawn, you can essentially just flag. B6 and zugzwang.
Wait, g5.
Look at that position. It's zugzwang.
But then the knight comes to d4 and there's g6.
So now maybe you just go king. I would go, what I would do? King g7 and just go for the flag. I wouldn't risk allowing the g pawn forward.
Okay, well, he's going to try to flag him, but it looks like knight d4 here. And now you can't take on 5 because knight e6.
Rook c5. Rook c5. Yeah,
but it's a draw on the board, but that doesn't matter because of the clock.
Is it? Yeah, yes. It is, because you can't take g5, as you said, because of knight e6 check. So it's a fortress.
But that's why time is a part of this event, right?
A lot of players struggling with time management. I think Everyone's going to get better as the weekends go by, but some of these slightly less experienced Blitz players, Robert, they need a little bit more adjustment time as we watch a time scramble here.
Oh my gosh.
Joshua against Mkhitaryan.
Oh my gosh. Mkhitaryan's so fast here. He's losing on the board, but he's going to hold. 96. He had the fork.
96. G7. He's playing for a win. He's playing for a win. No, he's not. Rook A6 check. Knight B5 again.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my land. He's going to lose on time. Jocelyn pulls it out. Unbelievable.
And you couldn't get two more experienced players, despite the fact that they're in their early 20s. But what a finish that was. Jospin, he wins this game, goes to 4-5, and that's the final game of the round.
Cool him down. The guy is tied for first. We got a big group of 6 different people. We got 4 more huge rounds, Robert. So buckle in, seatbelts fastened and mandatory. We are going to go on a 60-second break. You are watching the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Back in just a couple of moments. Welcome back to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Robert Hess and Daniel Naroditsky bringing you the action from the inaugural weekend of the RCC. 5 rounds in the books, Robert. Nobody has a perfect score. Nobody even has 4.5, but a big group on 4 out of 5. Literally anything can happen. Any of these players can win this event.
That's right. I mean, it's still early stages here, but something that you can't afford to do if you're David Paravian is what just happened. He wasn't at his board. Whoa. The game started, and when the rounds are approximately ending, you got to be ready. And the meantime,
stay at your computer. Where are you going? Make sometimes the bathroom trips fast.
Sometimes you just got to hold it in.
Sometimes you got to go.
I know that's not doctor recommended. We are Grandmaster Chess. We are not medical doctors. But Danya, what we do know for certain is we have seen this opening before. And instead of those lines where White gets to take on C6, instead Amin Tabatabai just takes back. And this is the opening that children all across the world are taught. And here Queens comes to F3. You just put pressure on this Knight and F6. You put a Rook to E1 first. But it's very solid for Black. Yeah, very old school.
Yeah, and I like old school. I like this opening for White. It really reinforces a lot of important positional concepts. And you'll often see this mass trade on F6 happen at some point, Bishop F6, Queen F6, and you get this endgame where undoubtedly Black's pawn structure is quite a bit damaged, but the 2 bishops, along with the open B file, which can be used in Black's favor, Black can put a Rook on B8 and start pressuring the B2 pawn. You can start thinking about these long-term positional ideas. They add a lot of life to the position, and there we go. There's the trade. And 92.
Danya, I tend to feel that having double pawns is a huge disadvantage, especially double isolated pawns in blitz games. So even if we know in classical chess, Black holds this position much of the time, sometimes you can win games, but I think in quicker time controls, it's really hard to play with these pawns because if this knight comes to H5, for example, it's not that easy to keep them defended.
That's a great point. And I think it can even be generalized to say that, in blitz, the damage caused by long-term weaknesses, whether it's doubled pawns or a weak square, is accentuated because you just need to invest greater amount of time to properly balance out these types of weaknesses with dynamic play. And dynamic play, concrete play just takes more time than the kind of play that White's going to display here, just sort of straightforwardly attacking Black's weaknesses. With that being said, objectively, the position is definitely equal.
That's right. But we'll let the players do this now. We'll come back. We just have so many interesting games. I want to pull up the one between Nepo and Giri. I mean, how could we not want to look at this game? Whoa. Because look at what's happening on the board. Is Jan Nepomniachtchi, he's up a pawn. And you know what he keeps going back to? I'm going to quickly show this moment in the Sicilian mainline stuff. And then he plays Rook G1, not for the first time today. And he's using it with, I mean, honestly, great skill, because at this point, after Rook went back to H1, he says, I don't care that I've done something awkward. I'm going to castle, play against your D6 pawn. And we see him win it in the game.
It's almost a similar type of position that happened, this Queen C5 Rook H1 stuff, to his first round game against Aram. And here he's won the D6 pawn. He's up a pawn. I mean, he can trade queens and go bishop D3. You could play it simple, and I definitely would prefer white here. But
how could you not, right?
But black has control over the C5 square. Black can try to get that knight to E5, and Geary is quite solid, but nonetheless, not the outcome that he wanted out of the opening.
That's right. This is one of these positions where in classical chess, you say, all right, I feel like I can hold this game, but I always like being up material in an end game where there are chances for black to draw, but I always feel the chances are much higher for white to win a position like this.
Absolutely. And Jan, he has some catching up to do. He's on 3.5 out of 5. He lost a game to Volakeetan in round 2. Painful defeat, but now he's trying to climb back. Big game against Geary.
And okay,
Rook H5.
Smart play by Geary using the 5th rank. A rook coming to G5. The G2 pawn stuck in place, and the E5 control for black's pieces. The knight can reroute, so D7 E5 as well. I agree that black is holding on for now, but white will remain better for the long haul. So let's keep on going. Down, I think we can go to the game between Arjun and Kirill Aleksanko, both players having a great event to start, a 4 out of 5. And I see Arjun's knights are working together well, like he did against Wesley So, but the position is about balance according to the engine, dynamic equality, perhaps with a bishop pair for black. You got to like those bishops, especially one on E5.
Yeah, the knights look nice, but you know, they're sort of stuck in the middle of the board, and black has no targets. Black has a small space advantage. So I think Aleksanko is for choice, but probably the position is closer to equality than to a significant advantage for black.
Yeah, you don't also want to take this pawn on B2, which may look like a hanging pawn because rook B1. All of a sudden, you allow the white rook into the game for what? I mean, you don't need to trade pawns in this manner. It just gives white too much play. So instead, knight B4 played by Aleksanko, and he wants to trade knights because
get rid of that knight. Yeah.
Let's say we trade the knight for the E6 bishop, the knight for the knight, and you think, oh, opposite color bishops, easy draw. You make them like B3 to put your pawns and protect the squares. In comes the bishop. The king has to go. In comes the rook, and it's very clear that black is dominating and just winning this position.
Yeah, and I always like to say that opposite colored bishop endgames with rooks on the board is a completely different beast altogether, because here, the fact that you have a bishop that can't control a certain set of squares can actually accentuate problems that you're experiencing night before is a great practical move. Now Arjun has to decide what he's trading. Is he just going to leave everything on the board? I mean, he could play a move like H3 maybe, because you can't really take on D5 twice due to the pin on C4. No, he takes on B4, and he's going to play rook C2 maybe after taking on E6.
Yeah, and you have to take on E6 because now black was ready to take on F4. So that's why taking on E6 is necessary, and rook C2. So very good understanding from both players in this game. But you're right, just keep pushing pawns. The bishop on E5 is very strong. And I think white has to play the move F3 next. If you don't play a move like F3, you're just going to get squeezed in this position. So I think F3 is a necessity. You try to create some weaknesses for black on these light squares that your bishop can attack. And you want to free up your bishop. Right now, the bishop restricted by these pawns on F5 and E4. So F3 just allows you kind of a new lease on life for that bishop on E2.
Although I would argue that after F3, black has bishop G3 check. I was going to propose something in a similar spirit with C5 and bishop C4 check. The problem is that C5 greatly weakens the pawn, and black, black's rooks like vampires encircling blood. C5, rook A C8, and then the other rook can potentially later come to D5. White cannot really afford to make any more long-term weaknesses here. Maybe G4 is another way to try to open things up, but then black can simply push F4. No, this is just very nasty in the long run. But Kirill trying to figure out what is the best practical attempt. He simply discourages C5 altogether. White can still play F3 though. Bishop G3 check. You go King F1, and then you can knock the bishop off with Rook H3. Iffy, but might work.
Oh, I do not like that move. You're allowing bishop into c3.
Whoa, you showed that. Whoa.
You know what, Danya, I think the solution was the counterintuitive f4. Because after, instead of b3, if you put f4, if takes on f3, the bishop takes, the bishop is extremely happy, might even come to d5, and then white could even think about trying to play for an advantage. And if you move your bishop back, then your g4 move is going to be played. So you're forcing open some diagonals for your light square bishop. That is the best move, was f4 rather than f3. And look at this. The king just went up to e5 here. And I think once again, the move f4 is needed so you can bring your king to f2 and get your rook on h1 in the game.
I'm afraid he might go g3 though. No, he goes f4. Good decision making there. This was the absolute last chance to do it, and he did it. Now for Kirill, probably his king should drop back, because if you take on Passant, like you said, Robert, bishop takes f3, and the moment white parks the bishop on d5, it feels like white should be able to hold this. He does take on f3. Does take on f3. How does he want to meet bishop takes f3? I guess we're about to find out.
Is there an exchange sack on d5?
I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's one of the big questions, because bishop d5 closes the position down. Well, first you can think about b5 as the pawn c4 is overloaded. But one of these questions is clearly not good right now, and that's not the point Danya and I are making. But there are times where you do sacrifice your rook for the piece, especially if your king could walk into d3 immediately. Like that would be something you want, but the king comes to e2 too fast for white.
And maybe because of the possibility of b5, white should delay bishop d5, but he didn't, and there's b5. And what is the purpose of b5? What happens if you ignore? Well, if you ignore, black takes on c4, and once bc happens, black has the possibility of creating a passer on the queen side, a5, a4. And when your position is so strained, you know, the more of these problems, long-term problems you have to deal with, the greater the possibility that you're just not going to be able to hold on.
And king d3. And now this rook can come to f2. You have to be very careful if you're black, because all of a sudden white's rooks are connected and the f5 pawn sticks out like a sore thumb. You have these pawns in g7, h6, the pawn h5 says no g6 for you. This is actually getting quite dangerous for black.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Like,
yeah, somehow Arjun has managed to coordinate his pieces, and you're showing it rook f2. And then if you play rook f8, you run into g4. How did this happen? I kind of forgot about this rook f2 idea.
It was like smart, but a bit maybe careless play to play a5 in this time. I mean, it seems so normal. We were just talking about trying to create a passed pawn.
And if you sack on d5 now, the king has the c4 square to run to. He goes rook d6 in order to meet rook f2 with a rook f6, so that the rook on f6 is defended by a pawn. That makes g4 a lot less dangerous. Now, black should still be okay.
Yes, for sure.
Now Arjun's the one pressuring black on all sides of the board. How the tables have turned.
He wants to open up the A file and bring his rook around into the position somewhere. You know, these three squares all could be landing spots for the rook. And Danya, if we go back, I mean, I just want to flash the earlier position. Like after the move b3 was played, this position was like so dominant looking for black, right? You just have all your pieces in good squares, and maybe just a few quick moves like king e5. Those type of moves that throw away the advantage to the point we're at now, where all of a sudden white is regrouping and it should still be level. You pointed that out. That's very true, but white has no issues whatsoever.
And black could very seriously consider basically bailing out of the move f4, offering a mass trade along the f file. I wouldn't rule that out, because white has a lot more ways to improve the position, or so it seems, than black. Kirill could also play, he goes f4.
Yeah, I like this.
Good decision.
Everything.
Good decision.
It's a draw for, and it's a great choice, because I think the trajectory of the game was in Arjun's favor, and now there's no risk for black whatsoever. So both players are playing really well in this event. It's going to be a draw, and I think we can head on to another game now that the rooks are off the board.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is going to be a draw for sure. Both players going to be on 4.5 out of 6, and the draw has been agreed.
Wait, what happened in this one? Anish Giri.
Whoa!
What? He was the one down upon.
He's up in exchange and winning the game. How did this happen?
So
it seemed like Nepo had a pretty risk-free position.
Right here. He
takes rook. Did he play rookie too?
But his rook is nowhere to go. His rook is
G5. G5. Bishop takes G5, and the rook has to drop back to F1. Yeah, and then you again fall into knight takes c3. That was a horrible blunder by Nepo.
Oh my goodness. And what you're talking about is after knight takes d3, there was bishop c4. He walked right into a skewer on the diagonal, and then he lost his pieces. And now as we get to the end of the game, I mean, he's just down in exchange, and Anish is just winning.
And all Anish has to do is figure out a way to break through. Nepo is hanging by a thread. Now, it's not totally over yet. Anish has a weakness on G3. Nepo's going to win that pawn. But you're showing it, Robert. King C7, King B6.
Wait a second.
Wait a minute.
Uh-oh. He's losing G3.
Knight F3 or Knight E2.
Didn't like Knight F3. Because Rook C2, Rook E2. Or Rook C4 as well.
C2, Rook E2. Yeah, now he's going to lose E4 in return for G3. I think Knight E2 allowed White to keep the E4 pawn. Very sloppy by Nepo here.
It's funny, though, because Knight F3 feels more natural, but Knight E2 is just more direct. And you need it to be direct.
Sloppy. I mean, he's not calculating enough. He's got 4 minutes on the clock. As we see him here, E5 trying to trade as many pawns as possible, but I don't see this working. I mean, Rook takes G2, EF, King E6.
And then
Black keep that G3 pawn. Oh my goodness, it's close.
The king is trying to walk over to H3, right? So if we just go forward with this continuation, King F4, King takes, King G4, King H3, you're trying to get here and take this pawn. It still might be losing and probably is losing for White, but sometimes there's actually like a theoretical draw that takes a while to figure out. But the point is that you want to get this pawn, but no, the Black king will go up the board and it should be a loss.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Black moves even like Rook A2 and then Rook A3, and at the moment the Black king reaches F4 and dislodges the knight from F3, it should be over. Yeah, no, King F5 I think is too dominant. If you have a bishop in these positions, it can be more defensible. The knight just isn't good at preventing the king from infiltrating.
And you just want to know part of this. He went F5. Just like, whatever. I'm not
H5.
Deal with it, steal the pawns as they're offered.
That's
and
a lot of pawns.
Can you just go Rook H2 and take the knight?
Black is up in exchange in 2 pawns. Yeah, Rook H2 is the easiest win.
Rook F1 now is very easy. And take it. Take the knight. And just play King E6.
Take the knight, King E6, King F4, and H4 forces Zugzwang.
And that's
going to be resignation.
Wow. So Anish Giri, 5 out of 6.
Nepo with a painful loss, and just seems out of sorts. I mean, that is not a blunder you see him making every day, taking that rook on G3. It's not knight takes D3 that he missed, it's the move G5.
Right.
And Noterbeck is getting manhandled here by Jasmine. Jeez, this looks like a terrible position.
What is that king doing on F4? I know we love the legendary king walks, but not in this position.
No, this does not seem like a voluntary thing. While queen takes C6. Okay, Jasmine still has to demonstrate accuracy, because if you let the king escape back toward G3, White does have a passed pawn right now. Maybe you should just take the pawn on B4 and, enjoy life.
You probably can get all the pawns, like queen D4 check, king G3, queen takes E5 check, F4.
Right, then go back for B4.
Yeah, just take them all and you're up 2 pawns.
Queen E1. Yeah.
Yeah, just ends the game. Actually, that's what we're about to see. No, queen G4 check was played.
Over.
Wait a second. Okay, he's going to take H4 and then B4. So he does get B4.
And then E5 in the end. Queen E1, queen takes E5 is crucial, because otherwise bishop takes D5 and White is still in the game.
That's true. Queen E1.
But not after queen E1, queen E5.
No, 2 extra pawns. Very easy win. The clock situation is not great for Black, but it's enough time for someone like Jocelyn. Right? That guy is so fast.
He's unbelievably fast. He's getting faster and faster, which is the scary part. Now, these endgames can be trickier than they appear, because White constantly has 2 ideas, perhaps in certain cases perpetual. Although Jasmine, look at the great job that he's doing to stop it. His king's going to come to G6. That queen on E6 is perfectly placed. It's lording over the whole position. And you got to watch for stalemate in certain cases. If you take the pawn on F2, the king is on H1, White's going to have a renegade queen situation.
It's a really, really good point, because I'm just going to force that on the board. Queen takes F2. You think, yes, I won my 3rd pawn. Queen G6 check forces you to take. And then that would be a whoop and a draw.
Yep. And I remember drawing a game like this where my opponent, I kid you not, had queen and 5 on the same side of the board against queen. And it wasn't, he didn't blunder stalemate immediately. He blundered one of the pawns to a stalemate trick. Then he blundered another one to a stalemate trick. And then I was able to force perpetual. Jospem, he's trying to find the most accurate. Good on Noterbeck. He is doing everything he can to make this difficult, but he's not going to be successful.
And Jose down to 1:15 seconds. So if he can't figure this out quickly, for example, queen G2 followed by H2, looks like you're just going to go promote, but not so fast. Your king is going to get checked 1.5 million times.
Yeah, I've spoken a little bit too soon. Now, wait a second. How exactly does he prevent this barrage of checks starting with queen H8 and queen G7?
Okay, so king g5. I like this as a starting point. Maybe this is exactly what he needed.
King g1, for instance. But how is he going to push the pawns now?
King g1, there might be queen e4.
Exactly.
Right? It's like so many question marks.
It's almost there, but you just got to avoid those pesky checks. Queen f7.
So queen b7 now?
Yeah, queen b7 and queen g8 check, king f4, queen c4 check. White is still checking. Oh, king f5, queen b7, queen g8 check, king f5, and there are no more checks.
Okay.
Or this.
King f5, no checks. It's funny because it's not the square you typically would want to go to, but the king is shielded thanks to this queen covering everything.
I think this was the most efficient win because queen g2 is totally unstoppable, but this should also be good enough. I mean, go queen e4. You just got to park the queen on one of those squares, but he keeps, Naroditsky keeps siphoning time off of Black's clock. He's down to 30 seconds. He hasn't made enough progress just yet.
And I think we've seen this position before.
We have 30 seconds. Here we go.
Oh my goodness.
Queen back, king f1. He's repeating moves.
Queen e8.
Oh my lands. How is he doing
F5?
this?
I don't like f5. It gives away a lot of checks.
I don't like it at all. Queen d8 check. It allows like 50 more diagonal checks. Now, the one thing Naroditsky has to be very careful about, do not allow Black to interpose with check. But wait, how is Black even escaping?
He goes h6. He feels like he has to.
Wait, king f1 maybe? Well, he's down to 20 seconds now. He might lose this if he's not careful.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, checks. My lands. Oh, h2.
Checks.
Queen e6.
Queen e7.
He's going to pick up the pawn. Queen back. Queen e6. Is he going to draw this game?
It's a draw. It's a draw.
Oh my goodness.
How did he save that?
Can't believe it. Wow.
I mean, that was as winning as it gets objectively. No time.
That was completely winning. And this just shows how tricky queen endgames are. Queen endgames are underrated. Getting it into a queen endgame is perpetuals and stalemates, and it's just a hard endgame to win in a blitz game.
What are we looking at here? Just pulling up another game. It's Black's turn. Black's pawn.
Where's Black going?
Black's going forward. This way.
Okay.
Black's going that way.
Grandmaster 26 doesn't know where the pawns are going. 12 seconds. He's falling asleep. Does that mean?
Yeah. Oh, okay, bishop takes d3 immediately. Yeah. It was difficult to wrap our head around whose turn and
no, but he could have played d2. He could have. Oh, but then rook takes b4, Robert. That was beautiful. Oh. If instead of rook takes b6, d2, rook takes b4, you think, oh, I promote to a queen. No, you don't. Well, you do, but bishop b3 check picks up the queen.
That's really nice. Well, that was the final game of the round. So we have 6 rounds in the books, Danya. And each game clear first.
And before round 7, we're going to have a 60-second break. Don't go anywhere. Clear first for Anish, but a lot of people right behind him. You're watching the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Back in 60 seconds. Welcome back to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Here come the most important rounds. Round 7 with Anish Giri in clear first on 5 out of 6. Robert, when did this pawn get to h3? Was it move 1 or move 2?
It was move 2. You don't know the impressive variation h3.
Oh, this, of course. How could I have forgotten? This is the most popular line now. This is what all the cool kids are playing. h3? Are you kidding me?
You know, I believe that Alexenko played this against Mustafa Yilmaz in the FIDE Grand Swiss, if I'm not mistaken. If I remember my correct. It's objectively not great. It's a waiting move. It's not great, but we get into an Alapin, which is
down a tempo. Okay.
Yeah, there's never any bishop g4. That's some good news, right?
It's prophylaxis. Yes, you have played prophylactically. Yes, but okay. IQ pre-position. Yeah, not bad. You know, I am skeptical, but okay.
It honestly reminds me somewhat of a Caro-Kann, even though the pawn structure is different. When they play like the exchange Caro-Kann, bishop d3, pawn h3, and they're just trying to eliminate one of black's options. There's no bishop g4, as we were mentioning, and you look at the eval bar, it really is loving white's position.
Wow.
And it's not that easy for black to play, because what are you going to do with the bishop on c? Are you going to play b6, bishop b7? That does take some time, and white could consider pushing this pawn to d5 at any moment.
Did Kirill play this in a classical game, the game you're referencing?
Yes, in the Grand Swiss.
Yeah, that just shows it's yeah, it's not the worst idea. And you know what this all started with? I remember Vadim Zvyagintsev, who is a particularly flamboyant Russian GM known for his innovations. He played e4, c5, knight a3, and he was playing Alexander Kolofman, and there's a famous photo where Kolofman is losing his mind at the board. He can't stop laughing. And everyone around them is laughing. This is at the Russian Championship many years back. That's what it all started with. Then people started playing a3, now h3. I mean, this h pawn is getting moved earlier and earlier. And when's this one h4 coming? coming to a theater near you within the next few months.
Well, it's working out here for Alexenko. He is up a bit on the clock. His position looks promising. The bishop on c8 has nowhere easy to go to. This knight can come to e. Excuse me, something caught my throat. But knight on e5 is going to be annoying, but black has control of the d5 square for now. So you take it away. I'm going to drink some water.
Please do. And we got a raid by Chess.com Live. That is Ketty and Vichy with excellent coverage of today's FIDE Grand Prix. We hope you enjoyed that coverage, and it was a really interesting round. So welcome to everybody from that broadcast. Thank you to Ketty and Vichy, of course. Yeah, so back to this position. Well, and before we go back to this position, just a very, very quick reminder before I delve into a discussion that the FIDE Grand Prix is going on right now, and the start times are at 6 a.m. Pacific, and the next round, Robert, is going to be tomorrow. It is, again, going to be brought to you by Ketty and Vichy, as Robert and I will be covering day 2 of the RCC weekend. But at the start of next week, I will rejoin Ketty in the commentary booth.
Awesome. Well, it's only upgrades for Ketty. She gets Vichy. Seems I don't know what's going on. I've just been talking nonstop, and now my voice went away.
Unacceptable.
B6 was played, trying to get the bishop to B7. The C6 square is where can be a bit of a vulnerable one in the future, but for now, the bishop will park itself there. White has the upper hand in detention in the center. Bishop f6 at any moment. Knight can come take on d5. The e7 pawn actually is hanging right away. So the question, Donnie, is should you take it? Knight d5.
Yeah,
knight d5,
I was going to talk about that.
And take this pawn.
It's not as impressive as it might appear, because you think, I take bishop takes c7, I'm attacking the rook. And I think rook takes c7 is for choice, because if you play bishop takes c7, black plays rook e8, and think about the bigger picture here. Black's going to put the bishop on b7. And black has this massive blockade on the d5 square. Black has all of the light squares. He's got a monopoly on them because white has given up the light squared bishop. This is not exactly, this is not the secret sauce for white.
Right. Not at all. I mean, this is where you hear, oh, compensation for the pawn. This is what the picture would be in the dictionary right here. This is the epitome of it. Bishop b7 covering d5, attacking the king side as well. So this looks great for black. So we're not going to see this, I don't believe, though Alexenko thinking, and if he doesn't find anything better, he may say, all right, at least I know that I will be up that pawn, and probably at worst, my opponent will win the pawn back, should be level. Otherwise, knight e5, I mean, it's begging to be played. And after bishop b7, there already are some tactics on this f7 square that need to be considered. And otherwise,
queen f3.
Exactly. I was about to say queen f3, pinning the knight. Usually a bishop wins a stare down with the queen, but that knight can't move. The bishop is not protected. Loose pieces always need to be watched out for.
Yeah, and in that position, of course, bishop takes f6 is a threat. Maybe black can play rook b8 and maybe he's fine. But it's iffy. It's iffy for sure. And as you said, Robert, at the moment the knight from d5 is gone, the f7 pawn ends up under pretty severe pressure by white's minor pieces.
That's right. The f7 and the c6 square, right? If you think, oh, we'll just trade everything, knight d5, bishop d5, we're all happy here, you're going to be met with a knight c6, even after queen d5, if we get a trade of queens. Then the knight comes into d7, not even c6. There's forks everywhere. So the light squares are really vulnerable.
Yes, they are. And has Aleksenko made a move? I think he has.
He has made the move queen f3 and then bishop takes f6. But if knight takes f6?
Does he want knight c6 in response to that?
But okay, now
I mean, yeah, bishop c6, queen c6, I guess. Black shouldn't be like worse here. Rook c8, I guess. Aleksenko banking on his good bishop, but that shouldn't be enough in and of itself. Bishop f6, knight c3. Whoa. Oh my God. What if knight f7 here? I don't even want to think about that. Oh my goodness.
I hope that was a rhetorical question. You're just going to figure out. But I think after knight f7, you can just take it, because after bishop f7, king f7, you don't have time to move your bishop from f6. Your queen is under attack. And if you do something with your queen, you take on c3, 2 bishops for black.
Slightly less complicated than it appears. And this is always a bad situation when the piece that's responsible for the discover check is under attack and you cannot give a double check. You're kind of busted because you got to move that piece and then your opponent has time to react. It goes knight c6. Whoa. Okay, and we're probably just going to see a mass trade here. Bishop c6, queen c6. Black's going to take on f6. White's going to take on c3. And the position, the smoke clears. And is white a little bit better here? He's got a slightly better bishop. Or is black the one who's for choice because of the c3 pawn?
Ooh, I mean, I think Anish can play on here. And he has to play, I imagine, bishop c6, or what else is he calculating? Just bishop takes
f6.
You could
wait, bishop f6.
Bishop f6, bc, queen d6, and
well, it's worth starting with bishop takes f6 because it gives you the maximum choice. But the practical, he has to make a decision fast. I wouldn't spend like 5 minutes here.
And he does. He's also up. I mean, Anish has been so good today. He's been playing 92. I love that move.
Whoa. Intermezzo to keep the d4 pawn isolated, not allowing the b pawn to reposition to c3. These subtleties, Robert, this is what signifies good form. When you see this stuff in 1 second, that's when you know you're not in clear first by chance.
And if white plays d5, we may get the situation we saw in Jose Martinez against Anish Giri, where the bishop in that game was on c6, but here the bishop would be blocked by its own pawn if the pawn goes to d5.
I was going to ask if black can take on d4, but then I realized after rook e4, e5, white can play rook takes e5. But then black can play bishop takes e5, b5 by Anish. He's trying to activate his rook from the side with the rook b6.
Yeah,
this line is unclear. I don't know. Maybe he could have done that.
No, but this looks just good for black with the
the two rooks and the mate threat potentially. I mean, if the bishop moves from b3.
So he doesn't take the pawn, but he's still better, right? Because white has this isolated pawn. The queen can go to d6. And as you were pointing out, b5 was an amazing move. And we should not take that for granted. The reason why this is so good is if you give white time, white will play d5 and d6. Let's say you play king g7, and then white plays d5. I'm going to play d6 and get rid of my bad pawn and open up my bishop.
Yeah, you can't fall asleep in these kinds of positions. I think when a lot of players think of positional chess, they think slow maneuvering. Well, it is maneuvering, but it's anything but slow. And he's activating his pieces, playing energetically. I think it's important not to overstate the case. Probably white is still okay if he's careful, but he's pressuring the queen side, keeping the foot on the gas pedal. His rook is coming to d6. And if white plays pawn d5, Robert, not only does that block in the bishop, but that also opens up black's bishop. And then b2 becomes a long-term weakness. Anish has just made sure of that by playing a4. He has fixed white's pawns on dark squares so that if white ever goes d5, there's going to be even more problems to deal with on the queen side.
And I think he played a little too quickly at this moment. He went rook d6, which you can't complain about. Black is going to remain better. Queen b6, rook d8, all sorts of moves are possible. But I think he could have played b4 and just said, if you take my rook takes, d4 is now about to be captured. Queen can come to b6, b2 is under pressure. So I think he had an opportunity to pounce, but he decided to keep the status quo at least for a few more moves.
Yeah, which is understandable because he's got such a pleasant position. And he's also bleeding Alexeyenko's clock bit by bit, keeping a big advantage on the clock. Kirill pushing his H pawn, thinking about H5 here. H5, though, very double-sided move because it could result in weakening White's king more than its vis-a-vis.
And H5, he chooses to go with it. And now there's this big question of how to deal with is H6 ever going to be played? Is it H6, G6? Or will White leave the tension as it exists on the board? And for Black, would you like a queen trade? Because if your king's going to be under attack, Queen C6 offers up an exchange of queens, and Queen F5 maybe even better. It's more forcing because the H5 pawn now is under attack. And if you take, this is not a bad double pawn, not at all.
Yep.
The D4
instructive move.
What a move.
Very instructive. I think a lot of players would rule it out on the basis of the fact that it quote unquote ruins Black's pawn structure. It doesn't ruin anything. It helps Black clamp down on White's pawn on D4. Such a nasty move to face with 3.5 on the clock. Another decision that Kirill has to make and more time off the clock. And the H5 pawn is in the crosshairs of Black's queen. If you play queen, well, you can't play queen E3. I guess you can play queen E2, but then the rook's going to come to D8. White's position is crumbling just a little bit. I think you have to bite the bullet, go into the endgame, Robert, but it's a nasty endgame indeed.
Yeah, it's no fun. And I think the best chance that White has is to create a target. So I would take and play B3. I'm trying to get at these pawns on the queen side. I know that by pushing my pawn to A3 pawn is weak, the bishop looks bad for the moment, but I'm just trying to finally have a unprotected pawn in Black's position and target it.
Right. No, that's definitely a try. And, White can't just sit still because he's also below 3 minutes now. Bishop B1. Now he wants, doesn't Anish want to go E6 or does that permit D5?
But it's a big question because the bishop on F6 is happy to see the move D5, right. But you want to try to win this pawn on D4 without necessarily trading off your own pawn. So he goes King H6. It's funny. I want to play Bishop takes F5, but there's a rook in the way. So
yeah. And if you play Rook F3, then of course, then Rook takes D4 is possible, as is E6.
Right.
Yeah.
And look at the clock. An extra 2 minutes on the clock here for Anish.
Right. And I'll take this opportunity before they go into a time scramble just to very quickly remind everybody what the format is for tomorrow, Robert. Just real fast. The top 8 players of today's Swiss qualify into the Sunday knockout. It's an 8-player single elimination tournament. It's a 10+2 game. Very important. There is an increment tomorrow, a 2-second increment with a higher seed playing White. If the game is drawn, a 3+2 game with a lower seed playing White. If that is drawn, then there's a 1+1 game, as often happens, to decide the result. And if that is drawn, then there will be an Armageddon. So it's a simple 8-player elimination. And that will be coming your way tomorrow, the same start time. But right now, we got a lot more action still left.
For sure. And tomorrow's action will be easier to cover, easier to follow for everybody, but still we're in the midst of the Swiss tournament. D5 at long last played, and the bishop stares into open space because there's no pawn on B2 to attack him. Or Black remains better. Black is a minute ahead in the clock, but this is the type of position, Danya, where even in classical chess, you can actually continue to press if you are careful right now for a niche, or you immediately allow your opponent to make a draw, for example. So you need to find him. He plays F4, not allowing his pawn to be attacked. He can put his bishop on E5, put his pawn on F6. Danya, the clamp continues.
Wow. The dark square clamp, as you said, that bishop on E5 doing hero's work, defending all of the important pawns, and Kirill trying to open the position up. Now, what does Giri take with? I like taking with a pawn just to keep the A3 pawn fixed on a dark square. And that rook on A8, it's not just a passive rook, it is defending A4, which is incredibly important. You can't allow White to win that pawn. And there comes the bishop to E5.
The rook can go to A5 to put pressure on D5, or go to C5. So that rook can swing into the game really fast.
It should. And he's going to park the pawn on F6. 2 minutes now on the clock. He has kept an extra minute on the clock for the entire game, Robert. This is such impressive time management. Really, I think it can't be stated enough.
Unbelievable technique from Anish Giri, and he's not taking this pawn H5. You don't want to allow rook H3. You might just get checkmated if you're not careful, but you're allowing activity for White. So leave the pawn on H3. I would play right here. I would probably just play F6 to start with. This rook, though, it needs to make a choice from A8. Is it going to B8? Is it going to C8? Is it going to G8? You have so many different squares to go to, and he chooses C8, which is the most natural. And here, rook C1 check, and then play
F6 maybe. Yeah, I would throw in F6 because you never know. That bishop on E5 is undefended. Bishop takes H7 is an idea. It's just a headache that you don't want to concern yourself with as the game heads into a time scramble. And when Anish is playing well, it's a work of art, honestly. Like the technique is crazy.
Look what he did. Look what he did. He went rook b6.
Rook B6.
He doesn't need f6. He realized that. Oh my gosh, this is picturesque.
But bishop takes h7.
Bishop h7 now. I guess he's just gonna go bishop d6.
And Anish is just saying, forget about everything. My king's blockading the h pawn. I am going after the a3 pawn. And of course, there's also made ideas if White's bishop somehow leaves the diagonal, then rook b1 could be annoying. But mainly, Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's going after the a3 pawn.
He is, and he's going for a checkmate as well. If this bishop doesn't stay in line with the b1 square, this rook is coming down to b1. And look at this. He made the move rook c2, rook e1, and the next rook to b1.
Rook e1. And where's the bishop going? Ugh.
I guess rook e1 is rook c4.
King H. And also king h3, king g4. No, rook e1, rook c4, and then maybe rook b3. But then rook takes a4.
Yeah, maybe.
You can't really afford to give that pawn an a4 up because then White can redirect all of his energy to defending the king side.
Done it. Maybe you bring rook b2, rook d2, rook d1. Just going for checkmate.
Rook b2, rook d2, rook d1. But again, if you put the rook on d1, Robert, I think king h3 allows White to buy some time. But then rook h1, rook takes h5.
Well, he did go rook a6, so he's thinking a little more passively. I think given the time situation, it makes sense, but you're giving White a chance here.
Bishop c2. Wait a minute. Now you can't defend the pawn, and he's just done something a little bit wrong here.
But the checkmating attack still exists. If rook a4, there's rook b6. There's still rook b6 if you want it.
I'm most worried about White's clock. He's now at a minute 6, and here come the pawns. Rook back to e5, saying, I'm going hunting.
Oh boy, rook b6. Here it comes.
Uh-oh.
Rook c1 is forced, but that a pawn is actually kind of scary.
It is dangerous. Maybe it's worth taking on a3, but that's essentially a draw. I mean, rook takes f4, and Anish keeping. Oh, but then bishop back to d6.
Oh, is there mate on? There's rook a4. There's rook a4 here.
Rook b6.
And then, oh my gosh.
Oh my God, you can't defend b1.
G4.
Are you serious? What a move. But now rook a1 check and rook h1.
Yeah, that's
it's
scary.
the Wild West on the first rank with Kirill shaking his head. But g4, what a great resource.
Only move just to free up some space for the king. The rook can be captured on f4, but then the rook on h5 is captured. And given the extra time for Anish, I think he should try to find a way. Maybe just take on f4. Oh, he took back? Why did he take the rook?
What? Rook g. What is this? Rook g5? No, but now Black is just up in exchange. Anish must be shocked right now.
We're shocked.
What is this now? Black is a passed h pawn on top of everything else. This is just completely winning.
Wow. But okay, the king on g6 not to rook f8, bishop e8 check. Okay, he allowed the king back in. I wouldn't have let the king back towards the center.
That is a shocking moment. I mean, now he's just down in exchange for nothing.
Yeah, and then the Black king's walking up to help in a checkmating attack.
He just lost hope a little bit too soon there. If he took Black's rook, it was still a game.
Okay,
now it's over.
And look at the clock. That's the biggest problem.
That's the reason, actually, because White actually is holding on for the time being. I just don't see Kirill holding this with 28 seconds left.
No. And Anish smartly brought his rook to c3 just so the position wouldn't repeat. But he's trying to
flying fast. Well, Black, of course, has to be careful not to blunder something and not to repeat moves 3 times. I would just push the h-pawn at some point. Just go h5.
And Anish is really just playing for the time right now.
Yeah.
Oh, but here comes the h-pawn. Here comes the h-pawn.
Here comes the h-pawn.
Oh, rook g2, by the way, is also going to be pretty good.
That was winning on the spot, even here.
Trading rooks.
Ooh, goodbye. Game, set, match.
Not perfect play, obviously. There were mistakes made, but I love... Oh, I thought it was bishop g2, but the rook was
oh my God, me too. Yeah, me too for a second. No, take rook g3, 5, goodbye.
Goodbye. Yeah, rook g3 next. And that's game. Anish Giri. He wins again, going to 6 out of 7.
This guy's a runaway train.
Never look back. So
are any games still going?
Ooh, Praggnanandhaa just had his bishop forked, and it's going to be a draw with Shigirov.
Sanan holding that position together. And this concludes that game. So we've got Anish on 6 out of 7 and David Paravian on his heels at 5.5. Have they played? I don't think so.
I don't remember their game if they have. And there's Jose Martinez, Amin Tabatabai, and Fabiano Caruana, along with Arjun Erigaisi at 5 out of 7. So Fabiano, he's mounting a comeback after we saw some early struggles against Shigirov, for example.
It ain't over. 2 more rounds left. Again, seatbelts still fastened, but we're going to go on a very short break. We'll be back in a minute. You're watching the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. The last 2 rounds coming on the other side of this break. Welcome back to the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Robert Hess and Daniel Naroditsky bringing you today's action. And Robert, 2 more rounds remaining and 2 more chances for someone to stop the runaway train called Anish Giri, who has just made a very quick draw against Fabi. What do you make of that decision?
I think Fabi had no choice at this point. And Anish, he's playing this smartly, right? This intelligent decision-making by him. He's ahead of the field. He just wants to secure his place in the top 8. He'd love to finish in first place and get the top seed. And he's well on his way doing that. A draw helps his cause.
And essentially, he wants Paravian to not win. So let's switch to Paravian's game and see who he's playing against. I'm sure it's a very capable opponent. It is indeed Jospem. And of course, Fabi is rooting for Jospem, who is half a point behind David Paravian, and they have a 4-night Scotch, which David has already played this tournament, I think.
He's played many times, right? We've talked about his games. I mean, Tabatabai. In that game, the queen went to f3. There were doubles pawns. We also saw David Paravian play this against Nordibek Abusatarov, although in that game, it was the line that enters the bishop pair for white. So here, once more, there's pressure on f6. You may say, why didn't you just play bishop e7? It is a possible move, but black is retreating here, and white can just continue with a rook to e1. Pawn h3 is often necessary to cover the g4 square. So bishop e7 is an option. It's just a little bit more passive.
Right. And bishop g4 is not dangerous specifically here because the queen often maneuvers to g3 and x-rays the king on g8. So that queen on f3 is super well placed. And black is taking, Jospem is taking his time in a theoretical position that I know he's familiar with.
And rookie, I mean, David Paravian, every single time he's doing this. So if you're playing David Paravian tomorrow in the knockout, if he goes on and qualifies, which it looks like he will, study this opening. This is a lesson provided to all of these top GMs who are playing in the tournament. So knight drops back to d1. c4 is often a move that you want to play against the c6, d5 pawn structure. You would like to leave black with isolated pawns. And this knight can come to e3, maybe over to f5. So this rerouting the knight makes perfect sense.
It really does. And David just seems like he has full command of the position. He knows all the key ideas and all of the key maneuvers, and a very practical choice in a 10-minute game, as you called it, Robert. I mean, first of all, the fact that black has damaged pawn structure, coupled with the fact that white has all of these relatively simple maneuvers that can allow him to gain extra time.
Right.
Well, and look at comparison to the opponent, of course.
I mean, just look at these double pawns, and it looks especially bad with the knight coming. And we just saw what Anish Giri did against Alexenko. So you may think, all right, knight e3, so what? And once the knight goes to f5, I take it, opposite colored bishops. But with rooks on the board, it's not going to be a fun defensive task. So knight e3. Oh, no.
What? David, he seems frustrated. I mean, just when the game is getting started, and I guess there's something he's not happy about here. Maybe the rook coming to e8, and he's just thinking that maybe, I mean, he wants to qualify because all of the prizes are determined based on tomorrow's results. So the most important thing is to get into this top 8 for the players. That is crucial.
And, I'm actually not that upset about the draw. It makes sense. I always like to see games, fight out to the very end, but especially when there's no increment, when there are nerves and you get there's a very clear plan to get to the top 8. I understand why the players are doing what they're doing. And we have Arjun Erigaisi here. He's taking Amin Tabatabai. So 2 players who don't have the highest ratings in the field, at least in classical chess, but they are super strong. They both have shown some great results in the last year. And for Arjun, well, he's very well known, of course. For Amin Tabatabai, who may be less known, he's about to play in the Grand Prix legs 2 and 3. He did really well in the World Cup, and he's known in the online sphere for sure. And here in this position, Danya, it's opposite colored bishops with knights and 2 rooks each. Black's pawn structure looks better, but there's no mobility for the pawns on the queen side. Whereas if you're not careful and white can march these pawns forward on the king side, then it's black who could be in some danger.
Yeah, for sure. And I think white does have to support that knight on e5 in this position. If you take on g6, then I think black has absolutely no problems. What is deterring Arjun from playing f4? Because he's taking his time. Maybe there's something hidden in this position that he doesn't like.
Probably just giving the e4 square, but he played rook a1. A6 was the response. The pawn was hanging. And you can't take on e5 twice. So that actually gives white a tempo. So just to show that, right, as you're saying, bishop to d4 is a knight. So if they're piece of equal value, is it still a skewer?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like, I've run into the situation so many. Is this a pin or a skewer? I'm sure there's a formal determination here. How many GMs does it take to figure out whether this is a pin or a skewer?
I'm going with skewer. It seems to make more sense. But
I'm going with pin. Wait, knight takes c5 and rook g6.
Oh my gosh, tactics.
I was going to point this out earlier that this threatens 2 things at once. It's a double attack. Bishop takes h3 because of the pin, and rook takes e5 because you have unskewered the rook from f6, and white's going to lose a pawn. Not a characteristic blunder by Mr. Erigaisi.
Oh no, that's not good news for him. And for Amin Tabatabai, he's looking at this moment. And he takes. Oh, what? What?
What? No.
Oh my goodness.
He sacked it, but rook g6 was a free pawn. Now he's down in exchange. Rook f4.
Yeah.
This is a terrible decision by I mean, I can't believe it.
Extremely uncharacteristic by Amin Tabatabai there. I mean, that was look, and he's got his head in his hands, but he walked
What is there to miss? Rook f4 is such an obvious move. Rook g6, unpin the rook, win the pawn, no risk. The worst thing that happens to you is a draw, but probably black is winning here in a blitz game.
Yeah, that is really surprising.
Goodness gracious. What did we just see?
And it's one of these moments where it's not like Arjun did anything, right? He just was making very normal moves. He actually made a mistake, but his moves were fine. And then all of a sudden, Amin just hands him this exchange, and now f6 is a problem. If you
king g7.
Yeah, but king g7, king f1, your rook is flushed out of there, and then white can play on.
Yeah, I mean, white plays b4, and the result of the game is immaterial here to determine the value of that decision. King f7. I like king f1, and once white puts the pawn on b4, it essentially deep freezes all of black's queenside pawns, makes it almost impossible for Arjun to push. And no, he's going for Amin to push, but he's going for the kingside pawns. He's going for the knockout blow. He's saying my passed pawns are going to be better than yours after bishop takes b3. Well, there's rook b4 also.
Yeah, you do not want to give up this pawn on b7. The bishop is under attack. h6 is under attack. Yeah, you don't want to allow the rooks to get active. It's even more important than winning the pawn. So if you're black, you really would love to win this pawn on b2. So maybe you retreat the bishop to g6, give up the h6 pawn, and then throw in the move. I want to throw in king g7, but now I'm not so sure about it.
Why not?
So here,
king g7, rook h4, rook takes b2. I mean, black's got a lot of pawns. Let's make no mistake about it. If you go rook b4, you walk into b5. So it's better to play b4, as you're indicating. It's still a game. There's still some life left in the position. But nonetheless, this is obviously white having all the fun here.
For sure. So I imagine with rook h6 being the threat, he does go king to g6. But now you can kick that rook out. And if the rook goes back, you play b4. White's going to be pushing on the king side over here. And okay, the king goes to h7, but can you put this rook to g3 and just go to the g7 square?
You want to go rook g3, rook hg4, and rook g7. Well, rook g3, black's actually, it's not so easy to prevent rook g4, because if you go bishop f5, you walk into rook f4, and the weakness of the f6 pawn, you called it, Robert, is just making this so hard to defend. Black has to keep track of everything here.
Yeah,
and if only he had that exchange back that he gave up for no reason.
Definitely a surprising choice. And I mean, look at this. The rook on g3 perfectly placed, covering the b3 pawn. Rook e3 might even be a big threat because I don't think Black wants to trade those rooks. And can you play rook
c5? Rook g4, he wants rook e7.
Yeah, but okay, rook here, rook e7, just to. And then there's rook c3.
Oh, man, oh man.
Goodness.
Bishop f5, rook f4. Everything is hanging. Oh, bishop d1.
Bishop d1, there's still rook f4.
Yeah, but he's in Groningen. Yeah, for Groningen c5. Disgusting.
I wonder how nervous the players are because they're both super strong. And in this particular game, they've been making many
highly uncharacteristic mistakes.
Yeah.
And the most shocking to me is the rook takes e5 move. I mean, there was some hallucination there, something he underestimated, missed. I don't know, rook f4, and essentially this is over. Because now rook d3 is a threat on top of rook takes c5 and rook takes f6. All of Black's pawns are crumbling here, like the Roman Empire. I mean, it's collapsing at a breakneck pace.
And rook takes f6 also now hits b6 now that you put the pawn there. Oy.
Jesus. Now, one last chance. Rook takes f6. I'll play bishop e2. No, but then rook e3. My goodness. All of these moves that trade something or win a pawn or fork something. I think you're completely winning now.
Like bishop c2 and d2. Yeah, you
rook d2, take everything. B6. You say, look, I'm giving that rook on d2 full power to supervise the pawn, and I'm using the other rook to take all of the Black's other pawns.
It doesn't work by one move because you have the rook coming to e6. Otherwise, this rook e2 move would be devastating for white to see.
If only the bishop shifted from c2 to d2. You can move the bishop to the side one moment in the game. That would help.
Hey, you're creating a new variant.
I am. Yeah, it's among the category of variants where you can do something once per game, which is an interesting concept, but I'll let the chat explore that one. In the meantime, rook takes b6. Here it comes. Arjun just has to make sure that he's stopping the pawn successfully, which he is. This is resignable now.
It is. And
rook
so
b5.
We see that Arjun's going to win this. I see a player we haven't looked at, Vincent Keimer, at 4.5 out of 7, trying to climb to the top of the standings. He's in a big tie.
Also for fresh from the Grand Prix.
Exactly. Well, I don't know if he's fresh or how he's feeling, but
right, probably not fresh from the Grand Prix.
Yeah. So one sec. Here it is. Okay, that game. I guess it finished as soon as I try to click on it, but the game so it's still going on. It's Vladislav Kovalev, another very strong player. So I don't even know where to go to. I see Jordan van Forest is playing against Volokhin. They're down to Jordan only has 3.5 points. That's how strong this field is.
Oh my God. Yeah, when you have like casual winners of Tata Steel who have 50%, that is kind of a sign. Yes. And that happens in, you know what other tournament that happens in? That happens in Title Tuesdays as well. So any tournament that has a gazillion GMs, that happens in. And of course, speaking of Title Tuesday, we have 2 Title Tuesdays now rather than one. Double the fun. One at 8 a.m. Pacific time start. The other one starts at 2 p.m. Pacific time. 5,000 in weekly prizes. So mark your calendars. It ain't just one Title Tuesday. It's now 2, Robert. And the more Title Tuesday, the better.
I agree. And with more than triple the prize fund, it's going to continue to be a highlight in everyone's week. And look at this position. Vincent Keimer, he's down a queen for a rook, but he's a pawn in the 7th rank. So this is
but it's not going anywhere.
The bishop just came around to defend. The rook can't go to c8 because the queen covers the square. But how does Black win this game? You can never go king g7 because then you promote. So where is Black's win going to come from?
So rook d1, for instance, yeah?
Sure. Or rook c1, let's say. Let's go rook c1.
And there's a trick. If you play bishop d8 and say, I'm just going to blockade the pawn. After rook d1, bishop c8, you go rook c8. Here, you also go rook c8. For a different reason this works, because now you can't take on c8 because of the rook on c1. So Black has to exercise tremendous caution. That's why the eval bar can be so misleading in these positions. Practically, it's very difficult, actually, to find the right approach. Maybe rook g8. Maybe you should get the rook from a8 to g8 in order for rook c8 to never be a check.
That's a really good idea. And I want to bring rook to c6, but then white's back rank is also a problem. Like you just take on a2, and there's going to be problems taking on e3 or playing f3. The white king is going to be under threat. So rook c1, rook g8 played very quickly. By the legendary character in the Peaky Blinders.
I was going to ask what show that's from.
Billy Kimba. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could also say that it's going down and he's yelling Kimba. So I'm not going to go away.
Oh my God. Is that, like timber?
Yeah.
I'm simply not going to comment on that.
Yeah, no, I'm just we're going to move on to a different game because we should.
You have stooped to the level of the Marianas Trench. I think the deepest point of the Atlantic Ocean, I want to say. Anyways.
Well, I'm just going to go back to the chess.
And, how do you like this? Bishop h4, rook d6, queen e1. Oh, I blundered d8 queen. No, bishop g3 check. You don't even take that queen. Who needs queens?
Pretty checkmate.
When you can have checkmate.
I like it. That would be
one way or another. This is completely winning for black, and plenty of time for Maxime to put the finishing touches on this game.
Okay, so let's go to the game between Abdusattorov because he's still up there trying to chase the pack. We'll just try to see if he is able to. Oh, there's a passed a
What's
pawn.
What's going on here? And can you stop it? You can stop it, and he does.
Okay, but there's also this H pawn. We can't lose sight of that pawn as well because that's why White would just win the game with f4 and then like run the king over.
Black is playing for a win.
Ooh, I like that move though. G5.
Stopping black from playing g5 and isolating the h4 pawn, slicing it up. Black runs the c4 pawn up the board. Black can use the c pawn as a decoy to get to the a pawn. Is this going to be a draw now?
You have to play a7 because rook b1 is a winning idea. So you need to play either a7 or rook c1.
Rook c1.
Okay, rook c1 played. Rook a8. They're going to trade off the pawns here.
Black can play this forever, although this is a dead drop. White's going to play f4 and then king g4, and there's just no way to make progress.
How about the
enough time to make a draw.
You think so?
A minute and a half is too much because here's another thing very, very important. Black cannot make any pawn moves because if black can make a pawn move, you can wait 40 moves and then make a pawn move. Here, there's just going to be a 50 move rule. If white is even remotely fast and if white doesn't blunder a rook, this is going to be a dead draw.
Yes. And we know it's a draw by position and also you have no pawn moves, right? So that you can just start pre-moving a bunch like rook g3.
Wow. And Noterbeck fell off a cliff after that very impressive start.
Yeah, it's been tough sledding out there because every round you play some other super grandmaster or, just speed demon or a combination of the two, and no easy pairings.
And even the 2600 in this field are hungry to strike at the top players. So you do not get a single easy game, as you say.
That's right. So this game looking like it's going to be a draw. Do we have any other games for the standings?
So Geary has guaranteed himself qualification. But obviously, I think he's going to be going for a quick draw in the next round as well to try to get as high as possible in the standings. Although, here's the thing. Sometimes being number 3 might be better than being number 1. It's like in basketball. Oh, you're playing the Lakers and LeBron in the first round of the playoffs. Sometimes you want to be number 2 when there's a knockout to be played after that.
Sorry. Did you just say playoffs and Lakers in the same sentence?
They're making the playoffs. Let's be real.
No. Right now, yes. All right, we'll have this conversation offline.
We will.
This game, it looks like, is going to be a draw. You are right that white has plenty of time and pre-moves are easy here. There's not even anything black can threaten. So it's just going to be... Yeah,
and Noterbeck keeps shifting his pieces to more to the left. He doesn't want to allow white's rook to come to d7. White's rook should just remain on d1 for all of eternity, just not to allow black's king any further infiltration into white's camp and near white's pawns.
Right. And there's nothing really more to say. So we can move on from here. Very, very easy draw. There's an unclear position between... I was going to say you. Did I say Daro? And I thought it looks like Daro. Yeah, so Darius Svirch, he's taking on Praggnanandhaa. And given the time situation here, and it's rook on d6, things can be a little bit tricky. But if that rook ever leaves the d file, down goes the d3 pawn. So that's why this position remains level.
Yeah, too many pawns are hanging, and you just have essentially mutually assured destruction on the queen side.
And
they're just going to repeat moves. Yeah, this is a draw.
Can't even bring your king up. There's no time to do that.
Neither side can do anything.
Wait, king up 4 is tricky. Rookie 5.
Cuts off the king. Draw.
Oh?
Rookie 8. No. Is he going for it?
I don't know.
30 seconds on the clock. No, it's black going for the win because Rookie 8 led to a repetition. I read something really interesting by a chess historian that 3-fold repetition, if you think about it, is actually kind of inaccurate because they're only repeating the position twice. Like they have an initial position and then the actual process of repeating takes place. So wait a second, is black winning?
He's going to get the pawn. And look at
Rook C1 and Rook C1. And look at White's king. White's king is completely cut off.
Rook A1 was such a nice check to include.
My goodness. And it's still not over. Look at the time situation.
Take the
20
pawn.
seconds. Daro has to be fast. Rook D5, King E3. Rook gets C3. A Lucina position.
A rook E4 check was also there. Play C4. Push the pawn. Go.
Yeah, this is easy.
No, but he's playing too slowly.
This is not easy. This is easy, not easy. King has to go back to B3. Well, but he's burning clock. Look at his clock.
He's playing way too slowly.
Way too slow. He's got 5 seconds down on Daro. He's taking a second per move.
No.
This is bad. He's going to lose.
C3. Oh, right. I forgot he can lose the game.
He can lose the game, but he's pre-moving to Rook B2 and he's going to King E3 now. Daro low on time.
Rook D8. Bring the Rook back.
D8. C2 pre-move. Daro should go Rook G7.
Rook D1.
Daro should go Rook G7.
C1 Queen. He got it.
Oh, he got it.
Young the Rook.
Check.
Oh, he's going to pre-move mate.
He's going to pre-move mate.
He got it. 0.7. He barely got it off.
Oh, my God. And that's a big game because he puts himself in a spot where he could potentially with a win in the next round. No, does he have 5 after this round or 6?
Prague is 5. He just won the
5. So with a win in the next round, he still gives himself a shot. And was that the last game of the round?
That was the final game of the penultimate round.
And we can see here, we got 6.5 out of 8. Anishin clear first with Parabian. Close behind him and a big group with 5.5. So everything is yet to be decided. The top 8 qualification spots are still to be contested. But first, a very quick break. We hope you don't go anywhere because we got one more round to go. You're watching the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase, the final round of today's festivities coming right up. Welcome back to the Rapid Chess Championship. And Robert, given that there are qualification considerations, the only important thing is to qualify. We have already a couple of results. In particular, Anish has already drawn his game to guarantee first place and a ticket, as has Fabiano Caruana with David Parabian. Completely understandable. We can't really blame them, given that the most important thing, once again, is to qualify.
That's right. And they can be assured that they will qualify because their tiebreaks are great and only so many people can jump to the 6-point threshold that they currently sit at. So other players who have 5.5 out of 8, they may be able to draw each other and make it, but actually they all would make it if they're playing one another. So let's see some of their games. We have Jose Martinez. He's playing Wazzo. Well, he's not playing somebody who's going to give him a draw because Wesley needs to win this game with the black pieces to secure his placement into tomorrow's knockout.
And when Wesley is okay with a draw, he plays the Berlin. That is his main opening. But here he goes for a Sicilian, the most combative of the openings, not allowing any kind of drawish line. Open Sicilian, I think it's a Najdorf. And H4, ooh, that's one of my favorite moves, which, of course, has become popular in the last couple of years. And we have a structure that we saw in the first round game between Nepo and Jacobian, where White could play F5, and then Black will have a choice between Bishop C4 and Bishop takes B3.
What a position this could be. But F5, this E4 pawn, it always needs to have an eye kept on it, because if you play F5, Bishop can take or go to c4, but here it might even go c8 to b7. There's a third option available, and then black is going to break things open with d5 at some point. So instead, we see that pawn takes e5, d takes queen, d8 check. And Don, you have to imagine this decision is because of the standings, but I actually don't like it. I think that black is better in these endings because white has an isolated pawn e4, and this pawn is on h4 where it's misplaced.
Yeah, the pawn on e4 is annoying. And again, it's a long-term weakness. We talk about it often. When you've got a long-term weakness in a short time control game, that just makes it, from a practical perspective, a lot harder to play. Black has bishop b7, rook c8, lots of improving moves, where Jospem harder to coordinate in an appealing way.
Yes, and bishop d2 played. And what is this bishop doing? It would have preferred to go to a square like e3, but he sits on d2 because after bishop e3, he probably was concerned that the pieces get kicked around a little bit. b4 is an option. So with the bishop on d2, b4 is less appealing. It immediately is under fire. So rook c8 is Wesley's choice. But Danya, this is like a free winning attempt for Wesley with zero risk in his position.
Yeah, I really don't like the way Jospem has handled the opening. I mean, he started by playing very combatively with that move h4, but all of a sudden this queen trade, and this is right up Wesley's alley. All these like relatively easy maneuvers, knight b6 coming to c4, bishop from d8 can swing to b6. And again, black is just a much easier time improving his position.
All the pieces can start going forward, and white has an extra pawn on the queen side, but doesn't really feel like it because all the pawns are stuck in place, whereas black has become active over there. And on the king side, right, we cut the board in half, look at the e to the h file, black has an extra pawn, black has control of the g4 square. Maybe knight g4 is going to be a good option. I would not play it right now, but it is an option at some point, and b4 will always need to be considered as well. As the knight going to d5, it's going to be a change in pawn structure and not that easy to evaluate.
Yeah, knight d5 is one of white's main ideas, actually. He can even potentially play it on his own volition. And so I would consider going knight c4 here for Wesley. No, he goes b4. So he invites knight d5. Is white contemplating knight e2? That just seems a little too passive.
Yeah, but his rook on c8 is so well placed. The knight d5 you take with the f knight, e takes d5.
And bishop f5.
Bishop f5. And if you go rook d2, there's knight c4 with tempo. Ugh. F6 can always be played. Ooh, this is actually, if you go rook d2, f6 just
f6 and knight c4 actually wins the game. Simply wins the game because knight c4 takes c3, and then black mops up all of the pawns on the second rank.
Yikes!
Wow,
wait, is this happening?
Is nasty. Oh my god, did he just play that?
How did this just happen?
Oh my god, f6. Does white have anything after f6? Wesley's going to see it, obviously. I would imagine he does.
G4 is the only move.
G4, bishop G6, H5. Oh, but Jospem, of course, didn't see this initially. But G4, white, black could also go bishop. Oh yeah, bishop D7, and then bishop E3, knight C4, take the bishop, and then go like A5, for example. From a positional standpoint, black is also dominating.
Yeah, this is really bad.
Yeah, bishop B6. I mean, did Jospem find it? He did. I mean, out of necessity.
I mean, you give black everything you could possibly dream of. You have a better pawn structure, connected pawns here. White no longer has an isolated pawn, but black is about to have the bishop pair. And then the attack continues with A5, A4. The queens are off the board, but look at the placement of black's pieces just staring at the white king. And he took the bishop on G5? He just wants the material.
It takes on H4. He wants the pawn. Now, he's threatening bishop G5 with a pin, and he's enticed by how far advanced the passer is on H4. It is a pretty double-sided decision, though, Robert, because black's position becomes a little bit flimsy here. The pawn from D5 could move to D6, and with no light-squared bishop, you're going to have to be a little bit careful about how you maintain control over the D7 square.
That's a good point. I mean, I like how you framed it, though, because you're absolutely right that having the pawn on H4, how could you not be enticed with it? It's an extra pawn. Your bishop can come to G5 if white's not careful, or just sit on F6. And D6 is an idea which isn't that threatening because you have D7 covered, but what is more important is the bishop can come to B7. And so if you can improve the bishop on F3, then white's position comes to life.
Right. Now, first order of business for Jose is to figure out how to prevent bishop G5. You can move the king. You can also play rook G2, but that gets the rook off of the D file where it supports the D pawn. So I would, okay, no, he does. I was about to say I would be inclined to move the king, but He instead moves to G2. Wesley probably going to go bishop f6, as you're indicating, and maybe knight a5, knight c6. Yeah, but then there's rook c5. I don't know.
Another consideration is knight d2, knight e4, just to get rid of this bishop and try to get this pawn.
True.
So it's honestly, Wesley made the choice, and now he's going to start thinking, and I bet you he regrets it some. Like that's these moments of chess players where you're like, oh, why did I do that? I would have had a much better bind, and he castles. Okay.
Black is still quite a bit better. I mean, I think that much is pretty clear.
Yes, agreed. But you know what I'm saying? Like, even if you know you're better, you feel like there's more to watch out for. But the way Wesley's playing in this game, I feel like he must be confident. And we have him on cam there. He's his usual self. Very calm.
Very calm. Yeah, I mean, he's one of the calmest players at the top. And Jospin now with 5 minutes. He goes knight a5, so he tries to shove his knight into c6, which is obviously an amazing square anchored by the pawn. And I guess rook c5 is a possibility, but then the knight could jump into b7, maybe? I don't know.
I like the look of that, because once you take the bishop, down goes the pawn on h4.
Right. Oh, and f6 becomes a possibility at some point.
So knight c4, then knight to c6. And wow, it hates this position. Probably knight e3 and just start stealing the f5 pawn.
Bishop f6 and knight d6 and just give up the b4 pawn and go for the positional domination in the center. I don't know about that, though. I mean, that b4 pawn I'm pretty attached to.
I thought you were going to play e4 after bishop f6.
Oh, yeah, e4 is much better. Bishop takes b2 check.
Yeah, you have all sorts of attacking possibilities here, but he goes knight e3. He's saying, I'm just going to take on f5. And once you take on f5, the knight comes to g3. The f3 bishop is loose. No, this is just really nicely done at this point by Wesley.
Yeah, he's adopting the sort of materialistic approach to this game, which makes some sense because he's going to get a lot of passed pawns. And White's knight looks very nice on c6. It's making a lot of noise, but, it's not the scariest knight in the world.
Yeah, you just put on your noise-canceling headphones and
which I have. Very nice. Love it. Dang, that was impressive.
Well, knight takes f5, knight g3, the rook, the bishop, all under fire. This looks like Wesley is just mopping up right now. And it's unfortunate for Jose. We'll see if he's still able to get in if 5.5 points allows him to at least tie for that 8th place.
It doesn't look like it because Wesley's going to jump out to 6 out of 8. Yeah. And look at how many people have 5 out of 8. Some of those are going to win. 5.5 is not going to cut it in terms of the qualification. And yeah, this is looking increasingly hopeless for Jospin. Rook takes c5, knight g3, by the way, is another important detail. And the bishop on f3 is lost. Bishop g4, rook takes c6 also.
Yeah, just crushing. Whoa. And you have to say, Jose was a wild card for this event, and he is a worthy wild card. He's been playing really well. He actually was in the lead in this tournament before Anish Giri started winning all of his games. So Jose proving that he's going to be a serious contender week in and week out. So it's good to see him in the field, the proving grandmaster. He's well known to the streaming community. He's a streamer. He plays in many of the chess.com Title Tuesdays and Arena King. So good to see him taking part. But unfortunately, it's not going to be enough as Wesley So is going to take this final game. So maybe the other games, it looks like Arjun Erigaisi is still battling it out. So maybe we can try to figure out his
He's on
situation.
5.5. So a draw, depending on the tie breaks, not all players with 6 out of 9 are going to qualify most likely. Some of them are. It'll be based on the tie breaks. But Arjun, no, he's actually not worse. He's down a pawn at the moment, but he's winning that pawn on h6. He's going to go rook h8. And once he wins that pawn, he has connected passers. So I think White's the one playing for a win here.
Although rook g7 after rook h8 just goes right for this pawn.
Wait a minute. I completely forgot about that move.
And look at Jan. He says, you don't ask me immediately. Twice, rook g7.
But probably a draw. I mean, rook h6, rook g3 check. You bring the king back to d2, and you've got the outside passer on h4. I think it should be enough if Arjun is careful.
I agree. The one thing that I don't like is his time, because once this pawn goes to c4, you start getting nervous about how quickly that pawn may advance. So as long as you can just keep your composure. Arjun is amazing at these speed chess time controls. And does he just rook h6? Is he just going to keep moving his rook from the 7th rank back to the 6th? Can he make a draw immediately?
He probably can. Yeah, if the king escapes to d6, he goes rook c7, allowing c4.
Yeah, I don't like.
He wants to push the h pawn, but h5 you can always play rook h3 and stop the pawn from behind. He goes from the other side,
There was a trick.
The king can escape here.
But there's also a trick that he could have played rook h3. Think, oh, I blundered my poor bishop on e6.
Oh, bishop d5. No, rook d3. So joke's on you.
These are the type of things you kind of need to set up if you're trying to win a position that objectively should be a hold.
And you know who's particularly good at setting them up?
Our guy named
Jan Nepomniachtchi.
Yeah, I mean both of them, right?
As is Arjun Erigaisi. But no, this. Oh, another trick there. Rook takes c5, king d6 won the exchange.
Kicking the rook away.
Oh, the tricks never end.
And let's see. King d6, rook c6 check. The king will have to walk back around, but this rook will keep going to c7, back to c6. And this is where it feels like no progress can be made. But Jan is still up quite a lot of time, 40 seconds. So if he can keep this game going, he may be able to win the game by virtue of being ahead on the clock.
Right. Although Jan trying to figure out a way to keep maximum chances alive, a draw is not sufficient for him. He does not qualify with a draw. He needs to win, and then he needs to hope that his tiebreakers are good enough. He might not even qualify with a win.
And here we go. We'll see king d6, the check. The king will go back to f6. I think he needs to just try to induce some kind of horrific blunder that won't actually. Here it goes. Here's the king coming to f6.
But then the rook can come back to c6. And how do you? Well, again, bishop d5 is not a threat.
Right. So rook h3. Play rook h. He did it. He did it.
Rook h3. No, but king moves. King e2 or king c2.
I'm not denying that it's still equal, but you look at this. Arjun's thinking. Now he's down 20 seconds. And where do you go? Because he's been avoiding putting his king on a light square. He doesn't like the look of it. He does go king e2, king e7 now.
Now rook takes h4 would have been a horrible blunder. And now you can go to d6 into d7 again, and it's the same trick. You can't go rook c5 because of rook takes h4. No, he does go rook c5.
This is going
the wheels are coming off.
Just to show that tactic that you mentioned earlier, the rook on e5 would be kicked out of there. So
so king e3.
All right, repeating.
Rook back to c5.
And then this rook can work its way back to assuming the king, but potentially work its way back to f6 over there.
Yeah, king d7. And again, this trick with rook d3 is going to give black a tempo. The question for Jan is, how does he make progress? Now he's 2 pawns up. It looks like he's winning, but it's not so easy to make his way past white's defensive construction, even though bishop d5 isn't currently a threat.
Great move, rook a3. No, rook bishop a3. b5 because of rook d3. Now rook a5 can be played.
Oh, and then
you don't have to worry about rook c5. The white rook is running out of space. So now after king d6, king d7,
I see.
You just need to be able. It was rook e3. Wait, is rook e5 now possible?
No, king d6 still. But then king d2. Oh, but it's still not over. Black's rook can move aside, and of course, black still has a pawn and still some hope. But Jan obviously blundered this, and he's not going to be happy.
No, the majority
h5 or rook
of his
g5?
over the board winning chances are gone, and now it's just the draw. Rook g3 next.
Bishop b3, you can actually take on c3.
And now just rook g3, bishop a4. Okay, be careful.
Still, there's a discovery potentially with king b1, c2 check.
Rook g3 would lose to bishop a4. King b1, c2 check.
He won't die. Nepo, knowing that his qualification is on the line here, potentially trying every last chance. But Arjun has defended so impressively. Check. Okay, where's he going?
I don't like leaving that king up the board.
Whoa. Rook g5, king b4. And once the king gets to b4, you've got rook a2 as a threat. Arjun has to drop his king back.
Okay, but that was...
Rook b3, I don't know about. Because now his rook is really awkwardly placed. He brings
it to h4 very quickly.
There we go.
And look, the position is still a hold, but he can continue just putting pressure on
forever.
King B. Like the king can eventually come to b4. Okay, plays bishop c6, sure. King d4 maybe?
King d4 and bishop b4, but then there's bishop f3 at the end of that line. So you can actually give that check, but all of this takes time to calculate. Wait a minute, he's allowed
Rook b2, Rook b2, Rook b1.
Rook b2.
How do you stop
Rook
that?
b2 is unstoppable. Arjun playing too passively here. He had to give that check. Oh my God, is going to win this game.
He can't stop it.
Oh my gosh. Total domination in the endgame. This shows how important piece activity is. Rook b2.
That's Rook a2.
Oh, even better. Rook a1 mate. That's it. King e3. King hides behind the bishop.
Oh my goodness.
Wow, Jan
Nepomniachtchi,
he doesn't seem to. Okay, the Michaela Maroney face. But,
Yeah.
right. Not impressed, I think is what it's called. Just silver medal. But he gives himself a chance to qualify depending on his tie breaks, which are not great. He's currently in 6th. But is he going to make it? I think he will. Now, Jospim and Wesley are still playing, I think.
And what is happening? Oh my God! How did
this happen? Wait a minute. There's a minute for both sides. Is this a draw?
It looks like it's pretty close to one because after
it is. Wait, and the pawn is wrong. Bishop E2. Bishop E2.
Yeah.
Bishop G6, then Bishop F5. It's a draw. It's a draw. Wesley cannot make progress.
And you can sack your bishop for this pawn at any moment, right?
How did Jospin do this? He was dead in the water.
Okay, allowing G4
Wesley is not going to qualify.
Allowing G4 is a little strange, but it's still going to be
a draw. Still a dead draw. Bishop D7 and then Bishop H3.
Yeah, just Bishop on F3. But what the point was before, H3 check.
Wait a minute, King
H3 and then
H3 and then King G2. And then
H3 takes King E3. Oh my goodness.
Oh my God. Wait, is this losing?
I think
it is because the king comes to G1. The king came to G1. Now, why in the world did he allow the pawn to get to G3? This is so much more complicated now.
And they both keep missing H3 check. It's hard to work out. We have the evaluation going up, so we have a hint. But
Bishop H3 now. And Jospin taking his time. Now, Wesley can try to flag him. He can get his king all the way back to D6. He can take one of the pawns. And then he can go all the way back
King
forward.
D4. He has it again.
King D4 and H3. He has this try again. King D4 and then H3. No, he keeps missing it. And now he's let Jospin take one of his pawns.
Just pre-move, easy pre-move.
That's it. Now it's a draw, and Wesley missing all of his chances there.
And you can pre-move Bishop H3 because even if the king could come take it, it would be stalemate.
Literally, and that's the worst kind of thing where you can pre-move both of your moves, and that's it.
And we spoke too soon because we were talking about how Jose, he's a wild card, but he's not quite going to get through. He draws this game against Wesley So, and look where Jose is, in 3rd place right now.
Unbelievable.
Oh my gosh.
That was huge because of his tie breaks and unbelievable save. So clutch. And I think our 8 is set, and Vladislav Kovalyev not sitting pretty there as he doesn't make it by tie breaks. Everybody but him with 6 out of 9 has made it in, Fabi included. Robert, he had an up and down event, but he makes it through to the end, as does Jan Nepomniachtchi.
And the tournament is officially over, so we'll see the standings, and you're right. Vladislav Kovalyev, he is out. Oh, no, he's not. He's in.
No, he's in. He's in. It's changed. It's Matlikov. It's Matlikov who's out.
And did Matlikov make a quick draw in the last round? Because if he did, he is going to be kicking himself.
He did make a quick draw in the last round. He assumed that with 6 out of 9, it looked like it was enough. But just because of his terrible tie breaks, by the narrowest of margins, 22 and 22.25, Vladislav Kovalyev squeaks by based on the last round results. Unbelievable. And he will face Anish Giri in the first round.
Wow. And look at those 8 players who have made it. Woo. Giri, Paravian, Fabiano Caruana, Jose Martinez, Kirill Aleksenko, Amin Tabatabai, Jan Nepomniachtchi, and Vladislav Kovalyev. And we think about those matchups, as you're saying, the 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, and
Paravian,
so on.
You're playing number 7. Okay, not bad. Oh, it's Jan Nepomniachtchi. Okay. That's why we love the knockout.
You did a little too well, right? You knock me down a place or so, but it's going to be so much fun tomorrow, Danya. So,
yes, it is.
What a day we just had.
We had an amazing day, action every round, and an amazing performance by Anish. And we'll delve more into that because we still have a rapid recap still to come. But first, we're going to set up for that. We're going to go on a very short break. You're watching the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. Rapid recap on the other side of this break. The all-new Classroom is live on chess.com. Classroom offers the very best virtual experience. You can connect with anyone at any time with a native video and voice conferencing. Check out the best way to teach and learn at chess.com/classroom. Speaking of learning and lessons, Robert, Anish Giri taught us a couple of lessons throughout his amazing performance today.
He certainly did. This was a rapid event, but his preparation, it remained stellar. And this game started in the Sicilian. And Danya, we had a big decision right here with the move H4 by Jose Martinez.
Yeah, H4 is a move that has gained in popularity in recent years. It's pretty wild, and it certainly weakens the G4 square. But white basically gets started on the attack. But Anish treating this kind of like a normal knight or playing E5, knight b3, bishop b7. Jose, rather than getting the bishop on e3, puts it on g5 in order to indirectly pressure the d5 square. So he starts in a very reasonable way.
Yeah, this is standard Sicilian fare. The d5 square is of the utmost importance. But as we saw in this game, bishop e6, he takes on f6, and then played g3. This makes perfect sense. You want a light square bind if you can get it. But Danya, it wasn't meant to be, at least not in this game.
No, and the first thing Anish does is he brings the bishop back to e7. He says, let me make sure that the d6 pawn is fully protected. Then after queen d2, knight d7, maybe Jose could have castled kingside, but he decides to go queenside. And this is where the problems really begin. Anish wasting absolutely no time. He says, I'm going to get the attack started. He goes b5. And after Jose goes f4, very importantly, Anish realizes that he doesn't actually have to do anything. He can just keep the tension. And he did that by reinforcing the d5 square with his knight.
That's correct. And knight f6 puts pressure on e4, making b4 an option. It also can go to the g4 square. You mentioned how pushing the pawn to h4, it leaves the g4 square behind. When there are pawns in a row like this, look at the square in between. The g4 square is black for the taking. As the game continued with bishop d3, castles kingside, you note that the bishop on d3, while it defends e4, it closes the d file down. So Danya, after king b1, b4, it was black who was striking first.
Indeed it was. And Jose decided that moving the knight back to e2 is not an option. Black's just going to get that a-pawn rolling, and white doesn't have anything started on the king side. So Jose's going knight d5. Now, of course, if black takes twice, then white takes on h7, sort of a typical tactic, and then takes back on d5. Not an option. So Anish says, let me compromise. He takes on d5 only once, and then he simply continues his attack with a5. And after rook he1, no problem. Queen c7, reinforcing the e5 pawn. And Robert, he keeps attacking the queen side, keeps putting pressure. Jose, in the meantime, he's basically abandoned his designs on the king side.
That's right, because the bishop on d3 is a good-looking piece staring at the black king side. But what else? You need more than just a bishop to attack. So we saw pawn e5, d takes e5, and here the bishop went into the black position on c6, but that bishop was never quite able to get out of there, Danya. So after rook a7, queen to e2, pawn a4, man, look at black's play. It just comes so naturally, and that bishop on c6, it defends d5. It's anchored in there, but it's not a part of the rest of the board.
Indeed. And I was very impressed with the way that Anish handled this. That bishop, it sure looks impressive, but it's kind of just quarantined. It's not really doing anything. And after knight d2, I was very impressed with Anish's next move. Jose wants to play g4, g5. He still wants to get things going on the king side. And Anish says, no. h5, moving a pawn on the same side where you're castled, never an easy move to play, but he creates a very important anchor point on g4, essentially freezes white's pawns for the rest of the game.
That's right. And that bishop would be better placed on f3 so that you could play the move g4, but the bishop already locked in there by its own pawn. Knight c4 was played, getting active. And then after e4, rook f1, we know that the sacrifice was on the docket with rook takes f6. So Anish calmly and quickly played the move queen e7. That was another impressive part of this game, Danya, is he had over 6 minutes while Jose was down under 4.
Exactly. And another impressive part of the game was how he handled the position after knight e3. I think a lot of players here would panic due to the idea of knight f5 and go g6. Not Anish. He goes a3, creating an ESD, equal or stronger threat. The point is that knight f5 is now coolly rebuffed by queen e5 with massive threats on b2. That's basically an unstoppable mate threat. So Jose deciding not to do that, Jose going back to c4 with his knight in order to keep b2 protected. But Anish taking on B2. And at this point, Robert, White's queen side is already very significantly damaged. But the most impressive part is still yet to come.
Oh my goodness. After queen E3, we were in shock. After rook A3, what a move. I was talking about sacrifices on A2 to open the A file, but no, rook on A3. It's always great to stop one square short of expectations. The point is after knight A3, B8, you're not going to checkmate the white king. You would need an open B file for that. The pawn is serving as a shield, but White has no access to any squares. There's no G4. The H5 pawn, the knight F6 cover it. There's no C4, C5, which is what you need to play to have any semblance of counterplay because the bishop on D6 and the queen on E7. So the way that Anish handled that moment right there, Danya, it was excellent. After rook E1, rook B8, C4, this is where things got out of control. Knight G4, and Anish spotted another tactic.
Yeah, this is an amazing move. Anish's technique was simply divine here. This looks like it blunders E4. Jose takes it because he basically has no choice. But no, Anish didn't blunder. He takes back, and knight F2 forks both of White's rooks. It wins back the exchange. But most importantly, after Black recaptures E4, the pawn on G3, which Anish fixed with that very, very powerful H5 move, is going to be hanging. And Anish doesn't rush taking it. He doesn't want to take G3 immediately because that allows White's pass pawns to get in motion with C5. So don't want to do that. First, Anish says, I'm going to patiently bring my king in with king F8. Then he makes some improvements to his position after rook E3 with G6. And it turns out that he doesn't even need to take the pawn on G3. The fact that the pawn is weak is enough to keep White completely confined. Jose probably could have kept resisting longer than he did, but he ends up collapsing pretty quickly, Robert.
Yeah, it's the power of the bishop. The bishop on D6, unlike a knight, which takes a long time to go from side of the board to the other side, the bishop on D6 protects that pawn on A3 while putting pressure on G3. And you're right, there could have been some better resistance. Can't really blame Jose, not much time remaining on his clock. And that pawn on B2 made his presence felt because the king has to stay put. And if this rook gets in the game as it did just now, after rook E7, rook E2 check, and bishop E5, this is where Anish Giri won the game and Jose resigned because rook B3 stops the promotion, but rook E1 check, king C2, rook C1 check forces the king away from B1, and after king D2, B1 equals queen, you're going to be down an entire rook. So that was a clean victory for Anish Giri. It was a very instructive lesson for us all, and that is your rapid recap.
Indeed. This is an amazing game by Anish Giri, and it really got him going. He never looked back, and he makes it by a country mile into tomorrow's knockout, where he will face in the first round Vladislav Kovalyov, a very capable grandmaster from Belarus. Literally anything can happen tomorrow. It's just one game to determine who advances. And Robert, we got some mouthwatering matchups here indeed.
We certainly do. And Anish Giri, as the top seed, he'll get the white pieces in the 10-minute plus 2-second increment game. So there will be increment, but Anish has secured the white pieces in the longest time control. And that's really important at this level. Anish has shown great preparation. He's shown that he can play practically with great speed. So Anish has to be the favorite as you look at the bracket, Danya. But who's maybe a dark horse for you in this bracket?
Jan. I think, Jan, squeaked by. He won that last round against Arjun Erigaisi really by the skin of his teeth, by the hair on his chinny chin. But he's in. He is a world championship contender, and tomorrow there will be an increment. So I think Jan, he's going to hunker down, and I think he's got a pretty serious shot at winning the whole thing. I mean, he's such a strong rapid player. He just needs to avoid playing sloppily. I think he might be number 7 in the standings, but he's not number 7 in anyone's imagination.
I thought you were going to say he just needs to avoid a teenager from Uzbekistan, because if it were not for Naroditsky Abdusattorov and that tiebreak match, Jan Nepomniachtchi would be our world rapid champion. So he was as close as it gets to being the world rapid champion. So you're right. I honestly forgot for a second he was in the bracket because he had to win that final round game against Arjun Erigaisi. And there are many fans out there who will be upset that Arjun didn't make it. He'll be back next week. He'll be back many more weeks. He's such a fantastic player. But today it was Jan Nepomniachtchi showing that super GM technique, just putting the squeeze on every last effort. And while it looked like Arjun was going to survive, it wasn't meant to be today. So you're right, Danya. I said it like 3 times already. It's more than I've ever said in my entire life. But Jan Nepomniachtchi, a name to look out for in addition to the likes of Fabiano Caruana.
Absolutely. And we will look out for him tomorrow. Let's quickly review the schedule. It's a pretty simple schedule. The RCC happening essentially every week with a break for the candidates. And tomorrow's knockout will start at exactly the same time as today. It will be 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. So mark your calendars. You do not want to miss it. And there's going to be so much action weekend after weekend, Robert. It's a pleasure bringing you the inaugural day of the RCC, and we got another super exciting day to look forward to tomorrow.
We do indeed. So we're going to say farewell to everybody, but this was day one of an entire season of the Rapid Chess Championship presented by Coinbase. So Danya, I'll give you the final words here, but I just am thrilled that we had the call together. And you know what's even better is a knockout tournament tomorrow to cover with you.
Absolutely, Robert. And we will be bringing you that tomorrow. So I want to thank you. Always a pleasure. I would like to thank all of the chat for hyping everything up. High energy chat on Twitch and on YouTube. And of course, our producer, Matt, for another excellent broadcast. Thank you, everybody. Have a great start to the weekend, and we will see you tomorrow for the knockout portion of this inaugural first week of the RCC presented by Coinbase. Goodbye, everybody.